arrived back in Scotland after being trapped in Gaza for more than 3 weeks. Mr Yusuf confirmed the news on X and posted a photo of the reunion, saying he's pleased his in-laws are safe and back home. The Foreign Office is pressing for the Rafah crossing to reopen to allow UK nationals to escape Gaza. 112 people were expected to leave yesterday when the crossing was temporarily closed. It is unknown how many, if any, were able to make the journey. Boris Johnson has visited a kibbutz as he continues his tour of Israel in a show of solidarity. The former Prime Minister, who arrived in the country this morning, made the trip alongside former Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison. Earlier, they met IDF soldiers in Jerusalem, and later, Mr Johnson is expected to meet Israeli President Isaac Herzog. Hezbollah claimed to have struck a vehicle near an Israeli military outpost on the border with Lebanon. There are reports of casualties, but no confirmation from Israeli authorities so far. The incident took place near the border outpost in Yiftah. There are several videos on social media showing sustained gunfire in the area around the Israeli outpost. The window for civilian evacuation from North Gaza to the south has now closed. Antony Blinken has left Israel to continue humanitarian talks in Turkey with foreign ministers. The US Secretary of State met the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in an unannounced visit to Ramallah in the West Bank. President Abbas told him an immediate ceasefire is needed. The pair also discussed getting more aid into Gaza and efforts to restore stability to the West Bank. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Home Secretary Suella Braverman have expressed concern about further pro-Palestinian protests during Armistice Day. The Police Met Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley has promised to take a robust approach and to use all the powers available to ensure commemorative events are not undermined. Deputy Prime Minister Oliver Dowden says Armistice Day should be about honouring the sacrifices made by previous generations.
I have really grave concerns about this, and I think that certainly representing a large Jewish community as I do, but it's broader than the Jewish community. We should be honouring and respecting the sacrifice made by previous generations, and you certainly shouldn't have the kind of intimidation that you see in those marches.
Meanwhile, Shadow Defence Secretary John Healey says we live in a democracy and must balance the right to protest.
It's an operational decision for the police. They are talking to the protest organisers who want to show their solidarity with Palestinians, and they're looking at a different place in London at a time 2 hours after the Remembrance service at the Cenotaph, and I hope we'll be able to get to a situation where we're not banning the right of protest, but we're absolutely ensuring that the remembrance, recognition and honour of those people who've served and fallen to defend us in this country is fully respected.
The Hamburg airport hostage situation has ended, according to police in Germany. It's after an armed 35-year-old man used a vehicle to break through security and onto a runway with a 4-year-old child in the car. The suspect and his daughter exited the car, ending an 18-hour ordeal that closed northern Germany's busiest airport. Police say it is likely a custody dispute and that the suspect was arrested without resistance and the child appeared not to be injured. And Prince William has arrived in Singapore to attend the 2023 Earthshot Prize ceremony. The Prince of Wales is hosting the United for Wildlife Global Summit in conjunction with his Earthshot environmental initiative. He hopes to shine a spotlight on Southeast Asia's role in the illegal wildlife trade. The Earthshot Awards on Tuesday will see 5 category winners presented with £1 million each to scale up their environmental ideas. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying, play GB News. Now it's back to Nana.
Thank you, Sophia. It's fast approaching 6 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Now, before we get stuck into the debates over the next hour, let me introduce you to my head-to-headers. Joining me today, political commentator Suzanne Evans and former editor of The Labellist Peter Edwards. Right, so here's what else is coming up. The government is facing backlash over its proposals to broaden the definition of extremism. Leaked documents have put fear into some groups who feel freedom of expression could be suppressed. Then is it really nearly time up for Joe Biden? I mean, can he stumble over his words anymore today? Marks 1 year until US voters are back to the polls. Is he still capable to be running office, and who might his successor be? Now, motorists, listen up. Drivers in London attempting to dispose of vehicles that do not meet the requirements of ULEZ claim that the Mayor's scrappage scheme grant are facing significant delays. So where is all the money going? And are you still waiting to receive a payment? Let me know. We'd love to hear what your thoughts are on it. Then Home Secretary Suella Braverman has faced backlash after saying that rough sleeping is a lifestyle choice. Well, she wants to restrict the use of tents by homeless people that block doorways and other public spaces. But do you agree with this? Do you think that they are a nuisance? Is she out of order for saying such a terrible thing? And then are Christmas adverts losing the plot? M&S has come under fire for their Christmas advert after criticism over the burning of paper hats and that look like the colours of the Palestinian flag. I mean, this was actually, I think, recorded in August, so they weren't to know. But what are your thoughts? Are we overthinking things and overreacting? Are they being a bit silly, showing, is this foolishness? Let me know. All of that on the way in the next hour. I've got an amazing mystery guest. Stay tuned to find out who that is. Tell me what you think, as ever, on everything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews. So the government is facing a backlash over its proposals to broaden the definition of extremism. So it will aim to include those who undermine the country's institutions and values. Now, these proposals, supposedly led by Michael Gove, have faced complaints from civil rights groups, with some warning that it risks criminalising dissent. Now, the government argues that we need to combat extremism, but critics caution that a broader definition might impede legitimate political activism and the right of freedom of expression. So let's welcome again to my head-to-headers, political commentator Suzanne Evans and also former editor of The Labellist, Peter Edwards. All right, I'm going to start with you, Suzanne Evans. What do you think?
So my first reaction to this is that if you wanted to make a law that was going to be a complete dog's dinner of a mess, then I think this is going to be it. As somebody who undermines the country's institutions and values, now, how is that going to be defined exactly? What are these countries' values? I think you could get 12 people in a room and they would all disagree about that, let alone whether something the whole country could agree on. Who are the country's institutions? Well, presumably that might include the Church of England and the royal family. So somebody criticising the Church of England, are they going to be in trouble and potentially deported if they're not a British citizen? Somebody that wants disestablishmentarianism. I've always wanted to give that into an interview. This is the first time ever. Somebody that wants, the church and state to separate, or somebody that wants to get rid of the monarchy. I don't think that's extremism. I think it's legitimate views. But that definition is a recipe for disaster. It is a threat to freedom and speech. And I think we've got a situation where the country's in an absolute mess at the moment. We have got these protests, which I'm with Suella Braverman on this. I think they are hate marches. But what happens is when you try and introduce laws on the back of extreme, unusual situations, that's when you get really bad law. Any lawyer will tell you that extreme cases make bad law. And as I say, I think this is going to be a total dog's dinner of a legislation if it goes through. Not, of course, withstanding the fact that also most government officials will be vehemently opposed to it.
Peter Edwards.
Well, it does risk criminalising dissent. And I heard another voice say earlier today that, for example, what if you're against the House of Lords? That's a British institution. One can agree or disagree about that, but it's a completely legitimate political aim to undermine the House of Lords. In other parts of life, there are people that want to undermine the City of London, which is, probably goes back more than 1,000 years, one of the oldest, most long-standing and powerful bits of the UK. These are all reasonable and proportionate aims that one can agree or disagree with, but they'd be gone about peaceably. So it's completely improper. I think the one crumb of comfort is it looks like we'll have a general election within 12 months. It might be another case of really announcement-itis. We've got to say something. It's Saturday night to get into the Sunday newspapers from a government that looks a bit tired, and it may never happen. I hope it will never happen.
So what do you think then? So you don't think the definition should be widened?
No, and also think about the issues we've got at the moment. We've got a cost of living crisis. We've got a horrific situation in the Middle East, and obviously we've got a lot of protests and a rise in anti-Semitism and Islamophobia in the UK. The idea that you kind of try and quell legitimate, and I stress the word legitimate, but quell legitimate political debate is total distraction.
Yeah, but it doesn't seem that there seems to be... People are able to call for things like jihad, and a lot of them are getting away with it.
And surely
Do you
covered
not
by...
think it's time to sort of start adapting, expanding the laws a little bit? I mean, people talk about freedom of speech, but if we still have to have some laws that protect people.
Well, there is a law. It's called incitement to hatred, and I think calling for jihad, I can't think of anything that doesn't fit into that. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but surely this stuff is covered by existing legislation. I can't imagine that it's not covered by the Terrorism Act. If you're calling for the active destruction of your country, I just think this is just a mess, as I said.
OK, so if the laws cover it, why are we experiencing this mess of people being able to call for jihad and all sorts of things?
I think that's a very good
adequate
question.
laws, why are they not appearing to work?
Well, a lawyer is probably better qualified than I to judge, but I think Suzanne is right to say there's a vast amount of legislation on the statute book that covers lots of these points. So if you intimidate someone by your use of language, if you intimidate them physically, and then to go to more specific examples, recent examples of people shouting on the streets that Israel, the world's only Jewish state, should not have a right to exist. So you're talking about the annihilation of Israel. To me, that's very offensive. And as I understand it, the police are empowered to take action on that already.
I think the question is, why aren't they?
But why?
I think
there's no point extending the definition, and then even with the current definition, you're still not doing what you could do.
So there's two issues, aren't there? I mean, one, the police just are possibly not interested, or two, they're completely outnumbered, haven't got the powers, haven't got the resources, haven't got the will. They know that if they start arresting people at some of these marches, those protesters are probably going to pile in on them physically and verbally. And then they're going to be in trouble because they just haven't got the numbers on the ground. So I think what we've seen is the police instead picking on very easy targets. They've been picking not on the protesters shouting jihad, they've been picking on people, bystanders, whoever, who say, actually, you know, you're wrong, mate.
Or people carrying British flags, or you know, it does seem a bit ridiculous. What do you think at home? You know how to get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.com, or tweet me at gbnews. It's just coming up to 13 minutes after 3 o'clock. We've got so many things to bring you in the show, and a very secret interview that I can't mention until it arrives. But today marks, so stay with me, you'll like it. But today marks exactly 1 year until US voters will be heading back to the poll stations to elect a new president. Now, many are speculating that the 2024 may be a rerun of 2020, of that election, but with the roles reversed, with incumbent President Joe Biden taking on his former rival Donald Trump. But a lot can happen in a year. But is Joe Biden's time in office up?
Haven't been able to communicate it in a way that is, let me say another way. With the nature, not a solid meeting with
If it isn't already, I can't get why he's still there and why they haven't worked out. I don't think he's well enough to be running such high office. But looking back, President Joe Biden's catastrophic withdrawal from Afghanistan, that led to the deadliest attack on Americans in Afghanistan since 2011. And we're in a situation now where 2 wars going on. So what is Biden's next step? That's if he is able to find the step down. Let's get the thoughts of my panel, political commentator Suzanne Evans and former editor of The Labelist, Peter Edwards. Peter Edwards, Joe Biden, is he fit to be running such high office?
He's certainly fit, and, you know, there was a free and fair election last time and he won it. And, you know, that could be the end of the matter. Is he going to stand again? I think so. And in America, the presidents do actually publish their medical reports, which is not something we've done in the UK. And his came out as reasonable. Obviously, he is going to be his party's candidate. I'll tell you one other thing about the clips. Obviously, show him hesitating. I think people's speech patterns change as they get through life, or if they're tired. Apologies if I pause too much in this sentence, you might think I'm knackered. But Biden's gaffes, i.e. saying the wrong thing rather than hesitation. Well, did he fall asleep?
He has fallen asleep quite a few times, actually, on meetings.
You know, I think the defence put out with his team, I think, was resting his eyes, wasn't it? We don't know, though, do we? We don't know that much about his health because we're only going to get selected extracts from his medical report.
It was actually during COP26, actually.
We don't know if he was asleep. Well, I mean, we all feel like feeling asleep when we watch government conferences televised, I think, for 8 hours a day. We don't know if he fell asleep or he's closing his eyes. I think there's a huge amount of speculation. Well, one is to do with consciousness, isn't it? There's a huge amount of speculation.
But if you close your eyes, and if I was to just go... Well, that's not
Some
great.
of us can carry on talking with our eyes closed.
I can, but, yeah, but that's not great, especially when you're supposedly the leader of the free world. But Peter seems to think that he could carry on.
I think he will. We could say all three of us could agree in the studio that he should step down, but he won't, will he?
No, we
He's
don't
going
know.
to carry on. It's not going to happen. We don't agree anyway. He's going to carry on. Will he be facing Trump again next year? Well, that would be exciting, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
There's a real
seems
part
certain.
of me that thinks that would be fantastic, actually. It would annoy all the right people, the wrong people in your case.
But Trump's ahead, isn't he, in terms of the
He is.
Republican primaries and the polling, so it looks like being a rerun, which probably does not fill us with too much enthusiasm.
But I think it will be great fun. I think it would be enormous fun.
Yeah.
And, of course, I think also potentially that if Joe Biden does run again against Trump, I suspect Trump might win again. So then we'll be really back to square one, and we'll have the whole media will go nuts. We'll have the whole bun fight again over US politics. Trump, every little thing Trump does or says, every time he rests his eyes for more than a millisecond, he'll be pounced on. Whereas I do think the media have given Joe Biden much more of a free pass. And
I do. He has, hasn't he? Come on.
Not on this programme.
Well, that's
not
because
here.
we're not the others, and we're not prepared to look at that and allow it to go and pretend that that's acceptable. But a lot of the others are quite happy. They wanted Joe Biden because it was anything but Trump. And now even the Democrats are thinking of getting rid of him. They don't even want him either.
So if Biden stands and wins, will you happily accept the outcome of a free and fair vote?
Biden won't win.
That's a big call.
He won't win.
Against a sexually corrupt opponent in Donald Trump.
Well, he hasn't been really charged with anything, really, has he? That's just lots of allegations and lots of different charges.
He's
that
had
seem
some
to be...
private settlements.
Yeah, but lots of people have probably had private settlements. What about Joe Biden? What about Hunter Biden's laptop? I mean, there's all that going on.
That wasn't a sex case.
Yeah, well, OK, but it's
sex more important than corruption?
What's the difference?
Dangerous ground, Peter.
They're both dodgy.
I don't think Donald Trump is a fit and proper candidate.
Well, no, he's fit. Whether he's proper...
Maybe physically fit.
Well, that's what we're talking about. Joe Biden isn't, is he?
I'm making a different point. I think Donald Trump lacks the probity and the decency to be a candidate.
Yeah, but, during his reign, there were no real new wars. Joe Biden, we've had the dreadful withdrawal from Afghanistan that probably prompted Putin to look at that and think, let's carry on with Ukraine, let's rock on. So we've had Ukraine. And now, of course, you've got this. When Donald Trump was in power, he brokered and worked really well with the
But may I come back on briefly? Because, joking aside about Trump, I don't believe for a moment, and I'm not sure if it's your intention, that Biden is to blame for the events in Ukraine. Yes, the withdrawal from Afghanistan.
No, I didn't say that. I said that what happened was that Putin would have looked on this and thought America is weak.
I think
that's why.
But I don't think you can you can make the read across to invading Ukraine. Absolutely,
I absolutely can, and I have.
The withdrawal from Afghanistan
was disastrous.
Embarrassing, and lives were lost, and it was also embarrassing for Britain.
Absolutely, but we weren't told.
But that did not pave the way for the invasion of Ukraine.
What I'm saying is, what would have happened there is Putin would have looked on at how disastrous that was, and I suspect he thought that America is weak, and this, if he's going to, would be the right time to strike.
I do agree with Nana that I think had we had a stronger man like Trump in the White House, I don't think some of these wars would have kicked off. I think Trump was actually very successful in keeping a lid on that. But just going back to the fact what's going to happen a year today, if we do have the same rerun, I think I'll say the same thing I said when Trump was elected last time, and that was that, and Biden was elected, how many people in America? Nearly 500 million people. And this is the best they can do, these two old men?
I think Trump's great. I think he'll pip it. He'll win it. I hope he does. But this is GB News live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Coming up, it's time to talk ULEZ again. I mean, aren't we all getting a bit bored of it now? Well, if you scrapped your car to get something compliant with ULEZ, you could be out of pocket. Don't miss that. It's up next.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
This time.
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Put your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good afternoon, 23 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Now, motorists, listen up. London drivers attempting to dispose of vehicles that do not meet the requirements of ULEZ claim that the Mayor's scrappage scheme grant is facing significant delays. Now, the expansion, which covers all of London boroughs now, has resulted in a surge of applications for the £2,000 grant towards the cost of a ULEZ-compliant car, which is leaving some motorists stranded, still waiting for their money. Transport for London estimates that ULEZ can generate up to £200 million annually for the first 2 years, but will slow down as more people make the switch. So I'm asking, do you support the scrappage scheme, and could this lead to more protests over ULEZ? Let's see what my panel head-to-headers make of that. Political commentator Suzanne Evans and former editor of The Labellist Peter Edwards. And, of course, we know that Angela Rayner has suggested that schemes like this will be spreading all over the country. So, Suzanne, what do you think?
It's a disaster, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, first of all, I mean, I objected to the ULEZ expansion to start with. Secondly, I object to the scrappage scheme because who's actually footing the bill? It's not the GLA, it's not Sadiq Khan, it's us, absolutely, it's taxpayers. So I think those both things are fundamentally wrong. I think it's a shameful tax on the poorest and some of the hardest working people in London. So the problem is, it seems to me, is that there's a lag between actually telling the Sadiq Khan that you're going to scrap your car and then getting your £2,000 grant, because you need to have a certificate of destruction to prove that you have scrapped it from the scrap merchants before you can get your grant check. Now, Khan says it's going to take 10 days. You could just about manage without a car, I suppose, for 10 days if it was vital to your business or your life or whatever. But now Londoners are saying it's taking well over a month. So how do you cope without a car in that month? The whole scheme is a mess. And as I say, it all comes down to the fact that we've got this ULEZ expansion. Now, Sadiq Khan says it's working and that 95% of people are now vehicles are now compliant, 10% more than before he started the consultation in May 22. But it's a nonsense. That's rubbish. 10% of people have probably upgraded their cars in that time, and more so, all of them are more so because they've probably been waiting to upgrade because of the complete lack of supply chain, which meant there were no new cars being built throughout the COVID period.
Peter Edwards.
A month is a bit too long, and I'm sure that delay will come down over time. Or slightly more positively, I was reassured of the funds set aside by the London Mayor Sadiq Khan for the scrappage scheme. The take-up rate is above 75%, so that implies that there is a level of faith and appreciation of the scheme.
I don't think that's what it means.
Well, if there's a government scheme and people are buying into it, then surely that's
Should we balance it off the cameras that have been destroyed by... And obviously that's illegal and it's wrong, you shouldn't be doing that. But let's be honest, there are over 1,000 ULEZ cameras that have been destroyed now.
Well, you answered my own question, really. The merits of the scheme should not be judged on the misbehaviour of a small criminal mob.
Well, I think that a lot of people probably support the fact that they don't like the ULEZ scheme. I think that mob is representative of the majority of people.
I don't. I'll tell you why. First of all, because when I'm in disagreement with, the government, I don't go and vandalise the government department. Secondly, this scheme was in Sadiq Khan's manifesto on which he was re-elected.
So what? But then, even if you put something in your manifesto, then you discover that people don't want it, because you then have to ask the people around where you're planning to do this.
What's the evidence people don't want it if he was re-elected?
Can I finish? Thank you. So you then have to ask the people around you whether they actually want the scheme, and the majority of people didn't want the scheme. And let's not forget that Labour lost the seat in Uxbridge on the strength of that ULEZ vote.
Well, I would question that. The majority,
you can question it, but
the majority was about 500 in a seat of about 100,000 voters. And we know that Rishi Sunak did a seat of the pants U-turn after that by-election where the Tories won. But to say the Tory victory was primarily down to ULEZ, I would question.
Well, you can question it, but I'd say it was. And actually, it was Boris Johnson's seat, so it should have been a surefire thing for the Labour Party, and they managed to lose that.
Well, I think, Nana, you're absolutely right. The consultation, people were not in favour of the ULEZ expansion. People didn't want it. They fudged the figures. I think the proof of the pudding will be in the eating, really. So the next election, Susan Hall, the Conservative GLA candidate, has pledged to scrap the scheme. So let's see if that happens. See who is voted for, Khan or her.
But what about the £2,000? Like a lot of people, as Peter pointed out, 75% of the people are taking up the offer.
Well, of course
apparently.
they would. Why wouldn't you? Somebody offers you a free £2,000 and you need a new car anyway. My lovely old Merc's done 212,000 miles now, still going strong, and it's ULEZ compliant, I might add. But if the car as old as mine and still going as strong, it might just persuade me to... Well, it won't, because...
Most of us don't have a Mercedes.
It's an old one. It's a 2006.
Vintage. No, most of us don't have a vintage Mercedes.
Vintage now. I love it a bit.
Do you drive in London?
Do you drive?
Yeah.
What kind of car is it? Is it like a ULEZ compliant-y thing?
Yeah, it's a very middle-aged, middle-of-the-road Ford Focus.
I could have guessed, actually.
You might laugh about my Mercedes, Peter, but electric cars won't last as long and won't do the mileage that mine has done. And I think there's a whole argument to be had about these are supposed to be green, but which is greener? A brand new electric car that's got to be scrapped after 10 years because the battery fails, or my lovely old Merc?
What's your alternative then when fossil fuels run out?
Well, I think the problem for me is not that I don't want to be green and not that I don't think you should look at alternative technologies, but the fact is they're not in place yet, they don't work yet. So trying to force legislation before you've actually got the infrastructure in place to actually make a change, that's the issue, I think. If you can give me an electric car when the battery doesn't cost 20 grand to replace in 10 years' time, so I have to scrap the car anyway, fine, I'll look at it. But until
or one that you can put out when it's on fire. I think. Or one that probably won't have complete failure, so you can't...
They all go on fire occasionally, don't they?
But if something goes wrong with one of those cars and you're inside it, I suspect the electrics, you won't probably be able to get out if the electrics fail. And also, I've been in lots of people's electric cars where they're so worried, no, don't put the heating on, no, don't use the radio, oh, yeah, no, don't do that, because the battery won't last as long as...
So then isn't that down to the manufacturer rather than the Mayor of London?
Yeah. No, but no, we're not talking about that now.
If I buy something that doesn't work, I don't blame the Mayor of London.
I'm not blaming the Mayor of London, Peter. We're talking about electric cars now and how viable they are. And Suzanne said that she would buy one if it could do all the things that she wanted it to do, and I'm expressing my agreement with her on that.
But it is the government's fault. It is the legislation's fault because they're pushing this. Rishi Sunak's just brought it down to extended it to 2035. No new petrol or diesel cars from 2035, brought it up from 2030. But they're pushing this agenda. And the technology just...
It's just not there. The technology is not there. And £2,000 does not cover a new car. But listen, I've got to move on. I'd like to carry on with this one, but I've got to move on. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up in the next hour, my monologue, I'm discussing Gary Lineker's comments as he backs the pro-Palestinian march during Armistice Day. That and lots more still to come. But first, let's get your latest news with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Nana. It's 3:30, our top stories. Humza Yousaf's in-laws have arrived back in Scotland after being trapped in Gaza for more than 3 weeks. Mr Yousaf confirmed the news on X and posted a photo of the reunion, saying he's pleased his in-laws are safe and back home. The Foreign Office is pressing for the Rafah crossing to reopen to allow UK nationals to escape Gaza. 112 people were expected to leave yesterday when the crossing was temporarily closed. It's unknown how many, if any, were able to make the journey. Boris Johnson has visited a kibbutz as he continues his tour of Israel in a show of solidarity. The former PM, who arrived in the country this morning, made the trip alongside former Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison. Earlier, they met IDF soldiers in Jerusalem, and later Mr Johnson is expected to meet Israeli President Isaac Herzog. Hezbollah claimed to have struck a vehicle near an Israeli military outpost on the border with Lebanon. There are reports of casualties, but no confirmation from Israeli authorities so far. The incident is said to have taken place near the border outpost in Yiftah. There are several videos on social media showing sustained gunfire in that area. The Hamburg airport hostage situation has ended. It's after an armed 35-year-old man used a vehicle to break through security and onto a runway where he held his 4-year-old daughter hostage for 18 hours. German police say it's likely a custody dispute, and the suspect was arrested without resistance and the child unharmed. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Back now to Nana.
Thank you, Ray. Coming up, Home Secretary Suella Braverman has faced a backlash after saying that rough sleeping is a lifestyle choice. Is this ridiculous, or does she have a point? That is next.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Welcome back. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. It's coming up to 37 minutes after 3 o'clock. There's loads more still to come, but I'm going to read some of your messages. You sent them in. We were discussing, joining me, by the way, we're going head-to-head, is Peter Evans and also... Peter...
You've not got married.
You've not got married. Suzanne Evans and Peter Edwards. Sorry, Peter. But anyway, look, so lots of you have been getting in touch. Amy, I've got this one from Alan. Alan said, why would you accept, because we were talking about scrapping the car and Sadiq Khan's scrappage scheme, and she says, why would you accept £2,000 from Khan's scrappage scheme if your car is worth much more at trade price? Your car might as well mysteriously disappear and you could claim the money from the insurance. Exactly, that could be the reason why the scheme is being taken by 75%. Let's see, what else have we got? Now, talking about the marches and anti-Semitism, Roger says the Met Police yesterday had 1,200 officers to police 100,000 to 150,000 pro-Palestinians in the march in London. It's a shambles. No way the Met Police can keep control of the marches. How on earth can the police safely police 2 events in London next Saturday? He's got a point there. I don't know how they're going to do it. On the case of ULEZ, somebody's beat me to it. Helen says the other 25% non-uptake, probably because the payout is up to £2,000, and when you find out it's less than 800, then folks struggle. Yeah, so that is the thoughts. Lots of you getting in touch. Keep them coming in. gbnews@gbnews.com, or you can also tweet us at GB News. But this story caught my eye today. Home Secretary Suella Braverman has faced backlash after saying that rough sleeping is a lifestyle choice. Well, she wants to restrict the use of tents by homeless people that block doorways and shops, and suggests that many tent users are from abroad. The Home Secretary has been labelled cruel and ignorant. She begins her crackdown on, I quote, a lifestyle choice. So do you support Suella Braverman restricting tents for rough sleepers? Peter Edwards, I'll start with you.
No. So I've volunteered with homeless charities in Leeds, York and London over the last 20 years and always try not to personalise things. So I can't say if it's cruel. I don't know what her motivations are, but it's desperately ignorant. The impact would be very cruel. And I wonder how many rough sleepers Suella Braverman has actually spoken to.
Well, I mean, that's a question for her. I can't answer that. Suzanne Evans.
I'm a little bit on the fence about this. I really do feel that any one of us could become homeless.
Of course.
You know, relationship breakdown, job loss, mental or physical health issues, addiction, get your house repossessed, whatever it might be. So homelessness is a massive problem. We've got to be sympathetic. And I think for me, Suella Braverman did say genuinely homeless individuals would continue to get support, and I hope she's right on that, because they absolutely must. However, I have to say I have experienced a very good friend of mine was a top private school in this country, and one of his friends deliberately dropped out, went on the streets, and my friend ended up being the only person at his funeral 50 years later. He had made that decision to turn away from his life of wealth and relative comfort to do what he did. Why, I don't know. I don't obviously.
But Suzanne, sorry to dive in. That's a rarity. That's an enormous rarity.
Well, but it happens. The fact is, she's saying that some people do it as a lifestyle choice, and he clearly did. I've also been in a situation where I've been a reporter interviewing homeless people and beggars on the streets, and I'll never forget the first one I ever interviewed when I suggested that he was actually probably making 200 quid a day on the back of a news report. He laughed and joked and said, of course I'm not, and then pulled out the biggest wad of cash I have ever seen in my life. He was clearly actually having quite a lot of money. So that's why I said I think I'm on the fence about this. The problem is trying to ascertain who is genuinely homeless and who isn't. The other thing I think where she's right is she's talking about people coming here from overseas, and I don't think there's any doubt about that a lot of the people who are homeless, they're not, their first nationality is not from the United Kingdom. Immigration's gone up every year since 1994, and the number of people in temporary accommodation, it's very hard to get figures for actual numbers of rough sleepers, but the number of people in temporary accommodation has gone up fivefold since 1990.
Yeah, but
as immigration has risen exponentially.
So
I think there's definitely something.
Peter.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very concerned by what Suzanne said. So I think, first of all, Suzanne and Suella Braverman, who seem to be saying something similar, are relying on a kind of tiny cohort of cases, people I met once or twice, quote unquote. Secondly, you can't say because someone has cash from begging that they're affluent. If someone is sleeping on the street, potential victim of crime, at risk from cold, they are not living a good or comfortable life. And then thirdly, I'm worried, and I don't think Suzanne stressed this point particularly, but Suella Braverman did seem to put a lot of emphasis on the nationality of people on the street. And I really worry about this approach of mixing poverty, criminality and foreign nationals all into one melting pot, because I think there's a bit of a hint about basically foreign people being up to no good, coming here to exploit Britain, which I think is...
Well, she's got a point, hasn't she? Hasn't she got a point, though? There are a lot of people coming here that are exploiting this country. We already know that with the situation with the migration. But I just think the issue I have with her saying that is that where are they going to go? And it's the same question that I ask with regard to the policies for those coming here via dinghy. It's like, where are they going to go? She's saying they shouldn't be in the tents, and some of them, I would say, in my view, the majority of them, I wouldn't say they're foreign people. The majority of the homeless people I see seem to be mostly British people in terms of, just from their accent and the way they carry themselves, they sound British to me, a lot of them. So the question is, where are they going to go? If they come out of the tents, this is a broad brush, it'll affect people who may be foreign people, but also people who are from this country. Where are they all going to go? They come out of the tents, then what? She hasn't said what would happen when they come out of the tents.
I think tents is a bit of a red herring, really. I mean, what's the issue with tents? The issue is homelessness and the amount of people we've got on the streets. Frankly, if somebody's sleeping on the streets, I'd rather they had a tent over them than just sleeping in a cardboard box.
The Home Secretary is demonising them.
I don't think she'd see it as demonising them. And arguably, I think the tents personally is a red herring, but if we're talking about getting rid of the tents and some new law, say, is passed,
it's for the tents,
so that then the police
tents
or
blocking
whoever,
doorways and things like that,
the police have to go and deal with people in tents, then I suppose that could have the benefit of finding people who are genuinely rough sleeping, genuinely homeless, and getting them into the system so they can get off the streets and back in support. Whereas at the moment, what happens? Everybody walks by, nobody takes any notice. So you might think that Cruella's...
You said it, Suella. You called her Cruella.
That was a bit of a Freudian slip,
yeah,
wasn't it?
She called her that.
Suella's, move is cruel, but arguably it might have an upside.
Do you think that there's any upside to getting people out of the tents in the doorways of shops and things like that?
We all want to reduce the number of people who are sleeping rough. I think there's no upside at all to what Suella Braverman announced, because she's not explicit, but again, there's a slight hint of xenophobia about it. But take away from the language, go back to COVID.
Well, hang on, you said the xenophobia. I don't necessarily think that is. I mean, if somebody it shouldn't be in this country and they're bypassing the systems and in a tent, that's not xenophobia. She's looking at that and saying that, in particular, she's maybe identified that a lot of the people, or a certain proportion of the people, are illegal migrants. Maybe that's what she's identifying. That's why she's...
Well, I'm afraid no one in the discussion, nor Suella Braverman, has offered any evidence to support that.
She hasn't specifically said that. I'm coming off your point as xenophobia, and now you're saying there's no evidence. So which one is it?
Suella Braverman is lumping together foreign nationals, poverty and criminality.
I think she's right, though, is there not? There is definitely a relationship with people who shouldn't be in this country, criminality and homelessness. There is a link. I mean, I don't think that's
I would question that, absolutely. And
why would you question it?
Well, born out of my own experience, I've never seen any evidence in close to 2 decades of working with homeless community that the percentage of people who sleep rough, who are here illegally, is higher than versus other parts of the population.
No, that's a totally different statistic. We're talking about a relationship between homelessness, illegal migration and criminality. I would say there is a relationship. I think she has got a point.
Didn't the former founder and editor of The Big Issue talk about this?
John Bird, yeah.
John Bird talked about this. He said that the whole distribution network for the magazine has been taken over by Romanian gangs. I'm sorry, I think Nana's right. I think there is a link between homelessness and poverty and immigration and crime. I don't think you can dispute that.
So you've got to offer some evidence, though.
Well, no, we should just offer some evidence with John Bird, who is the head of The Big Issue.
I mean, he does know what he's talking about.
He knows what he's talking about, right? You know who that guy is, right?
I do. I've written for The Big Issue, but he's not the CEO
But you
anymore.
said there was no evidence. She's given you some, but you're not happy with it.
My understanding is that's why he stepped away, because he could see that what he'd founded, with the best of intentions, was actually being usurped by foreign gangs.
I've never seen that in years of reading The Big Issue, given for the reason him getting to retirement age and then retiring as leader of The Big Issue.
Well, that's. I mean, we can research that and find out. But Susanna's saying that. But listen, that's the point that Susanna's making, and it seems to be that there is a link with migration. But the point you are making, which is fair, is that there will be a lot of people who aren't migrants who are caught in this. But she hasn't specifically said that. You're the one who's identifying a link with xenophobia. It's you who said that, not anybody.
Yeah, because I believe there's a hint of xenophobia about this kind of briefing into the Sunday papers. But let's kind of zoom out from the language, which is the first lockdown in COVID, there was a policy called Everyone In, where the Conservative government moved very quickly to try and get as many rough sleepers off street as possible.
Yeah.
And to be fair, that was relatively successful for a time-limited period. So there was a national crisis, and we came together to try and help people who are sleeping rough. Now we're in different times, and we're saying mean things about them to curry votes. That, to me, just typifies Suella Braverman's approach.
I don't know whether that would necessarily curry votes.
I have to agree with you there, Peter. If we can do something in COVID times, we can do something now.
I don't know whether that would curry votes. A lot of people who probably support the Conservative Party might think that what she said is cruel, but on the backdrop of everything else, she might have a point. But now, are Christmas adverts getting out of hand? Well, Marks and Spencer's has apologised and pulled down their Christmas ad after backlash regarding the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas. The advert, showing burning Christmas paper hats, received criticism for resembling the Palestinian flag, causing outrage on social media amid the escalating Israeli-Hamas war in the Middle East. Now, the advert was filmed back in August, and M&S have since deleted their social posts and retracted the advert. But was this the right decision to pull the advert, or are they just overreacting, especially given the fact that people know the advert was done in August? I'm going to start with you, Susanna.
So I actually quite like... I know there's been a huge backlash against the M&S advert, not just because of the Palestinian paper hat issue, which I think is nonsense, really. I think you're right. It was filmed in August. Red, white and green is traditional Christmas colours, isn't it? That's what it is. So I think that was ludicrous. But there's also been, of course, a backlash against the M&S aid, saying it's tearing up everything about Christmas, saying you should be selfish at Christmas. I thought it was great. I really enjoyed it, actually. I thought it was quite funny. I hate paper hats. I hate writing Christmas cards. Decorating the tree is fun, but I'm not very good at it. So, yeah, I thought it was quite good, actually. I quite liked it. I certainly won't be boycotting M&S as a result. I think it's a great company.
No, the food's too good. I'm not boycotting. Yes. What about you?
Well, all of us who can afford it do go to M&S at least at Christmas, because the food is very good. You know, I'm a churchgoer, as many of your viewers, so from the bits of the advert I'm very sad that, however jokingly intentioned, it ended up with people chucking Christmas things in a fire. But on the Palestine point, Marks and Spencer would not touch contemporary politics with a barge pole, let alone the Middle East crisis. The idea that Marks and Spencer have sent out an implicit criticism of Gaza for a Christmas ad is beyond nonsense. They wouldn't touch politics with a barge pole.
Yeah, but doesn't that just show how ridiculous people have become? That even though they know that this was filmed in August and it really couldn't have had anything to do with the conflict, people are prepared to create a level of outrage at this ad and then create some sort of relationship or link with the conflict.
I think it's mad. I mean, yeah, I'm a churchgoer too. You know, it wasn't like they took a baseball bat to an Advent scene. I mean, I would find that totally offensive.
Yes.
No ideas. Don't take anybody ideas from that. But yeah, but I mean, it was just paper hats and some Christmas cards, secular stuff actually. So I think it was all about fuss about nothing myself.
But why do you think that people are so ready to kind of get outraged about this?
It's the outrage culture, isn't it? You've got to keep your social media feed going. You've got to keep your Facebook page up to date, and look as though
But then
you're
Marks
getting
and Spencer's
involved
actually
with
reacted.
stuff,
They actually reacted to it.
I think, to be honest, I think in the current climate, they didn't really have a choice. I think people were wrong to see it as a Palestinian issue, but I quite understand, and I'm glad they've actually pulled that scene. They haven't actually pulled the ad, because it landed in my inbox this morning, actually. But that scene where the hats are being burned has gone now. So I think that was a good compromise. I think it's stupid, I think it's daft, but there's so much cerebral issues around all this and so much hatred going around and so much anguish. I think they did the right thing.
But ironically, as you said earlier, the ad was about being completely selfish, and the hate mob they weren't worried about that.
No, that's true. That's true.
It seems a very strange position for M&S to end up in. I mean, they could have put out a fairly neutral statement saying, we mourn the loss of life in Israel and in Gaza, and we have little further to say beyond a wish for peace this Christmas. And then kept the advert.
Yeah.
I think getting rid of that one scene was one way of shutting it down, but it didn't, of course, because then people started criticising everything else. But hey ho, like I say, I think. I look back at the days when I was growing up as a child, and the ads were so much more interesting.
They were, weren't they?
So much more interesting. They're so bland and boring now because everybody's trying too hard to be politically correct and too hard not to offend anybody, and actually that doesn't make for a good advertising campaign.
Now, I've just got some emails in because you were talking about homelessness and we were talking about what Suella Braverman was saying. Simon has messaged and he said, "Hi, Nana. I've talked to homeless people on York streets. They get more money living on the streets with a dog than they would being alone." So Simon says that. That's what he said in York. About the tents, Fred says, "I'm so angry the prison service send people back out into the community with nowhere to go. They are told to the council they'll be given a tent. This happened to me." So they're told by the council, I think he means there. Somebody just said that, Peter, they said they think you just make it up as you go along.
Well, I was a volunteer with the homeless community in York, like your correspondent, and the winters in York are incredibly harsh.
Yeah.
So if you're sleeping on Lendal Bridge with the wind whistling in, it's not much fun.
It's horrible. I mean, nobody would want anybody to be in that position.
And then Sandra sent me something about the demonstration. She said, "Nana, if you feel so passionate and angry, why don't they join their fellow citizens and fight with them? The war has nothing to do with Indigenous citizens who wish to live in peace. Surely the very people demonstrated arrived at our shores for peace, which is being destroyed." Yeah, I hear your point, Sandra, but I wouldn't go on any of those marches at all. Actually, I'll do what I can from where I am and see if I can help that way. I'm not somebody who goes on marches in the street. It's just not my thing. But fair play to those who do, as long as they are peaceful and they do it in a peaceful way. So keep those thoughts coming. Loads still to come. And let's see if there's anything else. What have we got here? I do love... Ooh, some swearing there. I'm not going to read that. Somebody says, if illegal migrants can be housed in hotels, then why not the homeless? What's the problem? I think they make a good point. I mean, if we're going to do that, we might as well do that with all the others as well. Well, listen, keep all your thoughts coming. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Still to come in my Great British Debate in the next hour. I'll be asking, should we ban the pro-Palestinian demonstrations? Also, I've got my monologue. We'll be discussing Gary Lineker. But it's basically, on a serious note, they're discussing, whether these protest marches are actually peaceful or whether you would, in fact, dare going on one yourself. Most Jewish people probably wouldn't. But don't forget, you can download the GB News app. But first, let's get an update with your weather. I'll see you in a couple of moments' time.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Generally, east is best for any Bonfire Night celebrations you're attending this evening. Eastern areas will hold on to largely dry conditions and clear intervals throughout. But in the west, we do have some showers to watch out for, particular focus across parts of northwest England. They'll be around the Bristol Channel Way as well. It's the second half of the night beginning to fringe into parts of Sussex and Kent as well. But generally still a lot of dry, clear conditions around, and underneath that some mist and fog will form, and it will also turn quite chilly, particularly for eastern Scotland, where we certainly can expect some frost to develop. As we head into into Monday, it is overall another day of sunshine and showers. Those showers most frequent in the west once again. Could be heavy at times, maybe with some thunderstorms and some hail as well. Still some sunshine in the mix, but the most prolonged sunshine will be for eastern areas, but a few showers just beginning to migrate their way across into eastern England later on in the afternoon. A breezy day overall, but temperatures around where we expect them for the time of year, between 10 and 14 degrees Celsius. As we head into Tuesday, it will start off fairly showery once again, but this ridge of high pressure is then going to start pushing its way in across the UK. So the showers will ease off, the winds will turn lighter as well, and into the afternoon, generally, things will turn drier for a lot of areas, and there will be some sunny spells around to enjoy. For Wednesday, though, we start to see a more widespread band of rain beginning to sweep its way in, but into the second half of the week, Thursday, Friday, the showers return once again. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News. Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Put in your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next few hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today, author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, and also former Labour Party advisor Matthew Lala. But before we get started, that's what I always call him, Christine. Before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines with Ray Addison.
Cheers, Nana. Good afternoon. It's exactly 4 o'clock. Our top stories this hour. Humza Yousaf's in-laws have arrived back in Scotland after being trapped in Gaza for more than 3 weeks. Mr Yousaf confirmed the news on X and posted a photo of the reunion, saying he's pleased that they're back home safely. The Foreign Office is pressing for the Rafah crossing to reopen to allow UK nationals to escape Gaza. 112 people were expected to leave yesterday when the crossing was temporarily closed. It's unknown how many, if any, were able to make the journey. Boris Johnson has visited a kibbutz as he continues his tour of Israel in a show of solidarity. The former Prime Minister, who arrived in the country this morning, made the trip alongside former Australian PM Scott Morrison. Earlier, they met IDF soldiers in Jerusalem, and later Mr Johnson is expected to meet Israeli President Isaac Herzog. It comes as IDF spokesman Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari held a press conference explaining how Hamas have built tunnels of terror under vital civilian infrastructure.
Unsurprisingly, Hamas built a hospital on top of their terror infrastructures. Those outputs of Hamas had underground facilities before they started to construct the hospitals. These cement arches are not needed when building hospitals. They are used to build underground city of terror.
Anthony Blinken has left Israel to continue humanitarian talks in Turkey with foreign ministers. The US Secretary of State met with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in an unannounced visit to Ramallah in the West Bank. President Abbas told him an immediate ceasefire is needed. The pair also discussed getting more aid into Gaza and efforts to restore stability to the West Bank. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Home Secretary Suella Braverman have expressed concern about further pro-Palestine protests during Armistice Day. The Police Met Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, has promised to take a robust approach and to use all the powers available to ensure commemorative events are not undermined. Deputy PM Oliver Dowden says Armistice Day should be about honouring the sacrifices made by previous generations.
I have really grave concerns about this, and I think that certainly representing a large Jewish community as I do, but it's broader than the Jewish community, we should be honouring and respecting the sacrifice made by previous generations, and you certainly shouldn't have the kind of intimidation that you see in those marches.
Well, meanwhile, Shadow Defence Secretary John Healey says we live in a democracy and must balance the right to protest.
It's an operational decision for the police. They are talking to the protest organisers who want to show their solidarity with Palestinians, and they're looking at a different place in London at a time 2 hours after the Remembrance service at the Cenotaph, and I hope we'll be able to get to a situation where we're not banning the right of protest, but we're absolutely ensuring that the remembrance, recognition and honour of those people who've served and fallen to defend us in this country is fully respected.
In Germany, the Hamburg airport hostage situation has ended. It's after an armed 35-year-old man used a vehicle to break through security and onto a runway where he held his 4-year-old daughter hostage for 18 hours. German police say it's likely a custody dispute, and the suspect was arrested without resistance and the child unharmed. Prince William is in Singapore to attend the 2023 Earthshot Prize ceremony. The Prince of Wales will host the United for Wildlife Global Summit in conjunction with his Earthshot environmental initiative. He hopes to shine a spotlight on Southeast Asia's role in the illegal wildlife trade. The Earthshot Awards on Tuesday will see 5 category winners presented with £1 million each to scale up their environmental ideas. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now let's get back to Nana.
Thank you, Ray. It's just coming up to 5 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now, yesterday, Gary Lineker criticised Suella Braverman when she said it is entirely unacceptable to desecrate Armistice Day with a hate march through London. If it goes ahead, there is an obvious risk of serious public disorder, violence and damage, as well as giving offence to millions of decent British people. Gary responded, marching and calling for a ceasefire and peace so that more innocent children don't get killed is not really the definition of a hate march. True, but let's have a look at some of those marches, shall we, Gary? So here is a person walking through the pro-Palestine protest with a banner stating Hamas is terrorist. So that, of course, was the sound of people with some quite abusive language that I obviously couldn't play right now on air. In fact, I wouldn't play. But basically, this guy's been attacked by some supposedly peaceful protesters who, if they were calling for peace, would actually have agreed with him. No? OK, what about this one last night in Trafalgar Square? Pro-Palestinian protesters throwing fireworks at the police. So if you're listening on radio, you can hear that doesn't sound pretty friendly at all, does it? And I doubt any Jew would dare attend this march. I mean, what do you think, Gary? And yesterday, there were also 29 arrests. And only last week, the Daily Mail uncovered a jihadi GP demo leader at a pro-Palestine protest. It turned out that Abdul Wahid, or his real name Dr. Wahid Asif Shaida, is the head of Hizbut ut-Tahrir, an Islamist organisation. He was also leading a double life, GP by day, jihadi on the weekends. He apparently celebrated the barbaric Hamas massacre on the 7th October of 1,400 Jewish men, women and children, describing it as a welcome punch in the nose to Israel. He was at the so-called peaceful protest, calling for not peace, Gary, but jihad. And given his comments about Israel being given a bloody nose, I think it's fair to assume that he didn't mean peace when he said it. He can't possibly carry on with his job. And when you've got people like Atik Malik, a Metropolitan Police advisor who has previously been caught on video leading the From the River to the Sea chant, which basically means death to all the Jews in Israel, and a prominent mosque chairman, as well as senior figure in the Muslim Council of Britain, praising the leader of Hamas, whilst also advising the Crown Prosecution Service, you know you're in trouble. These don't sound like peaceful people to me. Suella Braverman is right. I'm all for peace, Gary. I think we should all agree that no one wants anyone to die. But these protests seem to descend into hate marches. It's easy for you to say from the comfort of your ivory tower. But tell you what, Gary, how about you come down from there and go to one of those pro-Palestine protests with your banner of peace? Yeah? Fancy it? Nah, I didn't think so. So before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should we ban the pro-Palestinian demonstrations? In fact, all of them, not just the one coming up on Armistice Day. Now, protests have been continuing on the streets of London and elsewhere as people call for a ceasefire in Gaza and an end to occupation. Tensions have been rising every weekend as the protests continue. Then at 4:50, it's Worldview. We'll cross live to Los Angeles with Paul Dudridge, the host of the Politics People podcast, to get the latest on the US. Plus, we'll be talking to Foreign Policy Advisor to the Prime Minister, Dr. Afia Falk, who has just had a meeting with Boris Johnson in Tel Aviv. Then at 5, it's This Week's Outside. My special celebrity guest is a competitive swimmer and has competed in the Olympics, Commonwealth Games and the World Championships. He's also been a contestant on Strictly Come Dancing. Can anyone guess? I think you probably already have. Who do you think he is? Stay tuned, you'll find out just after 5. That's coming up in the next hour. Tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews. Right, let's get started. Let's welcome again to my panel author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton and former advisor to the Labour Party, Matthew Laza. Right, I'm going to start with you, Matthew Laza, because it's your first time on the Sunday with me. So what do you think about all of this? Because you've got the likes of Gary Lineker saying, oh, this is not a hate march, it's a pro, you know, but yet the evidence would suggest that most of them do descend into what would appear to be a hate march.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, Nana, when you invited Gary to join the protest. I mean, it's just got beyond parody, hasn't it, when he's sitting in, if not his ivory tower, his very large house, tweeting...
Barns.
Beautiful bar. Yeah, is it in beautiful bars? Yeah, probably doing an OK photo shoot at home whilst tweeting away about a protest which is turning violent. I mean, if I would say to Gary, why doesn't Gary sell poppies next week on Charing Cross Station? We saw the images of the poppy sellers. I actually met a friend who was getting off the train at Charing Cross Station earlier in the week. I sat on the bench, saw the poppy sellers there. We already had one on, smiled at them. They weren't being smiled at yesterday by the people who were there. So, look, I believe in the right to protest, but it's one thing to have a peaceful protest. Clearly things are getting out of hand, but above all, what we don't need is celebrities putting their two pennyworth in from many safe miles away while our police officers put themselves at risk.
Although he might argue that when we said, because last week, of course, when on the October 7th, when those things happened, everyone said, oh, Gary's staying quiet, Gary's staying quiet. But now he finally speaks, you're like, just be quiet.
Well, yeah, that's a fair point. But, I mean, the problem is that, you know, Gary was a footballer for many years and he seems to see everything as a football match. You're on one side or you're on the other. Everything can be simplistically reduced to a slogan in a few words. Now, if you were being fair to him and you look at the wording of the tweet, it's sort of attacking Suella's language rather specifically. But even so, I think that, you know, he's trying to sort of be unnuanced in response to nuance. It's just a mess, you know. And clearly these protests are now very, very alarming. People are getting very, very anxious about going out onto the streets of London, and they're clearly not doing the cause of peace or the cause of the Gazan people any good. So it's altogether a disaster, and the last thing we need is Gary. At least we haven't had Carol Vorderman in the last few days, so be thankful for small mercies.
Christine.
I would probably add, touch wood, if we could find any.
I think one of the things that's been most noticeable about these various marches is the difference in tone between the Palestinian marchers who were shouting from the river to the sea, all those terrible things. We know exactly what they mean. There is hate in those marches, and the very peaceful, dignified protests that the Jewish community have been doing. And I think the difference is enormous. But Gary Lineker, to me, you might say, why don't the BBC stop him? Well, first of all, they changed the rules to allow him to do it. They were changed for Gary Lineker so that he could put his oar in all these things. And Carol. And frankly, I think that they regard the BBC workerati, the top brass, regard him as their sort of useful idiot. He says the things that they would like to say, and they don't feel they can say them, so don't worry, Gary will do it for us. But I can't remember who said it. Yes, he was attacking Suella. That's really what he wanted to do. But I think he's absolutely... Well, they are hate marches. They are filled with hate. You can feel it in the air, and they wanting to get rid of the Jews from Palestine and the Gaza Strip, etc., is a fundamental, visceral hatred of the Jewish people. And that, I think, carries through onto the streets of London, which is what I think is so dangerous and so damaging. You now have Jewish people in London who dare not go on the bus or the tube, and they don't want to go out, women in particular, on their own because they're frightened of being attacked. Now, that is what we've come to, and that, to me, those hate-fueled marches, because they are. Okay, not everybody on the march is filled with hate, but the whole tenor of those marches is, to me, is hatred.
It does feel that way. Yes, there will be... My friend actually went on one of the marches and she said that there was a very... she said there was her alongside Palestinians and alongside Jewish people all wanting peace and da-da-da, and I said, that's lovely, but that's not what is being played out in the media, and that's not what I'm seeing. So she said that there was a lot of, you know, peace and they were standing side by side, but I sort of thought, well, did you go there carrying an Israeli flag? Because I don't think that anyone would dare go to...
Well, we saw the guy, the very brave guy with the Hamas a terrorist banner. I hadn't seen that footage before. I mean, you know, that guy's got guts.
But all he said was that they are terrorists, and
which they are.
Which they are. And even if you were on that march and you were genuinely looking for peace, you would agree with it, right? So
absolutely.
So he's not saying...
Because if you want to free Palestine, you should want to free it from the grip of Hamas. Absolutely.
Everybody in that region should want the destruction of Hamas. That's what it should be all about. And a lot of the other Arab countries... Actually, fundamentally, they agree that Hamas has to be dealt with. And frankly, this is the moment. And if they don't deal with Hamas now, they will just come back. I know the leaders are living in Doha or something, I'm not sure where it is, safely out of the way. But they've got to be completely crushed, obliterated, so that they can never rise again. Otherwise...
But Gary does make one good point, of course, because he's saying that everyone wants peace or ceasefire, although a ceasefire won't equate to peace, because that's what was actually happening before the massacre. So before the October 7th massacre, what was happening was a ceasefire, although the bombs were coming over and everything. There wasn't an actual ground on sort of... full-on war. So that would be perceived as a ceasefire. So what has happened now is a break in the ceasefire after, obviously, what happened on the 7th of October. So Gary does make a good point with regard to the fact that he doesn't want children and people to die. But
nobody wants children.
Nobody wants that. And the easiest way to stop this appalling violence is for Hamas to release the hostages. If they want that, then release the hostages. That should be requirement number one for this whole thing to scale down.
Absolutely. And I think celebrities need to be careful when they're saying things, that they don't forget that. You know, I mean, you know, I saw a nightclub, a sort of fashionable club night in East London, sort of with 6-page statement about its position on Palestine and Gaza today. And of course, you know, that would have been fine to declare peace, but there was no mention of what the Israeli people have been through. And the thing is, what I find extraordinary about the marches is normally marches have a point because they're calling for something. So remember the Iraq War when 1 million people marched? I remember being trapped inside Labour conferences, people outside. That was to ask the British government to do something. They were protesting outside the buildings where those decisions were being made. These marches are actually not calling for anything.
Well,
because they're calling for something. Not that the British government can't do it.
What they're wanting to do is impose their strength. And we're here, and this is what we're going to do.
It's bully boy tactics of might.
That's what they're
trying to do.
Well,
we will talk more about the marches because that's the question I'll be asking you. What do you think? I mean, is it time to ban all of these pro-Palestinian marches?
It's time to ban celebrities tweeting.
The BBC...
About anything other than their latest book.
But the BBC tried that, and I think he may even be breaching the guidance of the new rules.
Yeah, because isn't it within 48 hours? Yeah,
it's 2 weeks.
Is there no football at the moment?
There was a football match, I think, only yesterday, wasn't there?
They caved in last time in front of Gary Lineker and let him do it. And to me, this is a step too far, and I think he should be disciplined by the BBC. We'll see.
Well, I mean, if you've been reading...
It's our money. He's getting, you know, millions and millions of our money.
Well, listen, if you've been reading any of the stuff about the BBC, they're going to be finding themselves in a lot of financial difficulties because, of course, they're going to have to pay a lot of gold-plated pensions to people, and that's going to cost them about 40%. Or I think currently the pensions are costing them about 40% of their income already. But when time moves on, some of these bigger celebrities, when they retire, a lot of that money's going to these people.
My pension in the BBC is not gold-plated.
Isn't it? Oh, that's a shame.
I knew I shouldn't have got up out of bed this morning. I mean, that is such a depressing thought that we're going to have to go on funding Gary Lineker for the rest of his... Well,
think about funding my pension, my tiny little pension. That'll make you feel better.
Well, I'll be dead long before Gary Lineker draws his pension, probably. But it's a very depressing thought.
It's 18 minutes after 4 o'clock. These two, cracky. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Coming up is Worldview. We'll be crossing live to Los Angeles and Israel to get the latest on what's going on around the world. But up next, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, should we ban the pro-Palestinian demonstrations? I've got a poll up right now on X asking that very question. What do you think? Get your questions in. Send me your thoughts. Email gbviews@gbnews.com, or why not go online on Twitter and cast your vote now. The question is, should we ban the pro-Palestinian demonstrations? And that's all of them. What do you think?
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Good afternoon, it's 22 minutes after 4 o'clock. If you just tuned in, where have you been? It's OK, there's still time. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. Don't forget as well, you can download the GB News app and check out all the programmes. But it's time now for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, should we ban the pro-Palestinian demonstrations? Now, that's all of them I'm talking about, not just the one coming up next weekend or the ones. The fighting might be in the Middle East, but the effects are global. Around the world, regular demonstrations have been held to show support for Israel's and Palestine. And back home, thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters gathered in London yesterday calling for a ceasefire in Gaza for a 3rd successive week. Now, this comes amid a row over protests planned for a week's time, which could disrupt Remembrance Day events. Today, people formed a human chain to show support for Israel hostages held by Hamas. Tensions have been rising every weekend as the marches continue. Eyal Biram, a member of the Kidnapped from Israel group, says that pro-Palestinian demonstrators are not respecting the UK.
They make me to feel unsafe as Jew, as an Israeli citizen, as someone right now who lives in the UK. I see the violence in this protest, and I see that they are not respecting the place that they are, the United Kingdom. And here we are standing remembering the Remembrance Day, thinking about the United Kingdom, about the people, and working with the United Kingdom government to bring the hostages back home.
So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should we ban the pro-Palestinian demonstrations? I'm joined now by political commentator Suzanne Evans and Matthew Stadlin. With me in the studio, joining me live from the Leeds cultural commentator, Dr Philip Kisley. All right, so Philip, I'm going to start with you. What's your thoughts on this?
Hi, Nana. I think that we should ban them. And the reason I think we should ban them is because they are an affront to free speech. They aren't about the ceasefire. They aren't about peace. They're a celebration of aggression. If they were about free speech, if they were about all of the things they purport to be about, then they would allow Israeli advocates to stand there and talk about give the argument for Israel. That's never going to happen. We saw yesterday, I think you've just been talking about it actually, we saw yesterday the guy who was holding up the banner saying Hamas are terrorists. That's just a simple fact. And he was attacked. I think that really shows precisely what these protests are about. But I think there's something else as well. I think they represent a deep-seated bigotry and anti-Semitism in the institutions as well. Because I was just looking today, Dr. Martin White, who's a paediatrician at Newcastle Royal Infirmary, he said, and I'm quoting here, I've written it down, "Ha ha ha, Sieg Heil, ha ha ha, gas the Jews. Ha ha ha, just kidding. But have you seen those YouTube videos about the Holler hoax? They're pretty convincing." So I don't think it's just people on the streets. I think they're being egged on, supported and endorsed by the institutions. That's why I think they're an affront to free speech, and that's why I think they're very frightening.
All right, thank you for that. Suzanne Evans.
I have a huge amount of sympathy with that view, which I think was very eloquently expressed. My default position is absolutely to say no, we shouldn't ban them, because I think the right to protest should be a universal right, in my view, not just an absolute right in a democracy. I believe passionately in free speech. However, it does come with limits, and it seems to me that this has been breached on every single one of the occasions that these marches have been held. I think at the very least there should be a parliamentary debate on this issue. I also think that these marches need to be much more strongly policed. I think we should bring the army in if necessary, because it seems to me that the police are completely outnumbered and overwhelmed here. I just look at what's happening and I'm absolutely appalled by it. And this is the problem, isn't it? We've got this vile expression of hate on our streets. And of course that is going to lead to calls for a ban. But I do think that is a very dangerous ground to go down in principle.
Matthew Stadden.
No, I'm very clear about this, Nana. I support the right to protest peacefully within the law. I think that the vast majority, and by the vast majority we're talking thousands or tens of thousands of people on these marches, are not breaking the law. They are marching peacefully. However, there are obviously elements on these marches who behave in despicable ways. And that's what our police force is there for. I'm Jewish. A very close Jewish friend of mine was on the march yesterday, and he saw no hate on any banners. However, and this is an important caveat, because just because I believe the marches should be allowed to go ahead doesn't mean I would go on one of them myself. He did not see a single banner calling for the release of the Israeli hostages. And that's just one of various reasons why I myself will not be marching next weekend.
But the point that Suella Braverman was making, that these marches do seem like hate-filled marches. I mean, that's just from my observation. I know you said your friend went on one and it seemed quite peaceful and there was no expression of external hate. But did anybody go on one of those marches with an Israeli flag? I mean, did he talk about that, Matthew?
Well, as I just said, he didn't see any placards calling for the release of Israeli hostages. We saw that very disturbing.
No Israeli flag.
No, I didn't ask him about that, but we saw that very disturbing clip, didn't we, where someone said Hamas are terrorists, and he seemed to be being abused. That's entirely unacceptable. Hamas are terrorists. They're not just terrorists, they're medieval savages. What they did on October the 7th was absolutely disgusting and depraved. That doesn't mean that the vast majority of people on those marches support Hamas, but I would like to see expressions, far more expressions, against Hamas on those marches.
I think that's
can I just get Philip in on that? Because last week, Philip, we talked about the jihadi GP, didn't we? And he was a leader for one of the Islamic groups, which was really calling for the blood of Jews, actually. And he was happy as to what happened and that Israel was given a bloody nose by what happened on the 7th of October, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is just a Groundhog Day for us, isn't it? You know, it's protest after protest. We're going through the same dreary thing over and over again. And as I've just said before, it's driven by professionals as much as anything. I mean, I was just looking at some of the images today, and in Charing, I take on board what Matthew's saying, but Charing Cross Station today, there's a swastika there, you know? And what people are trying to do, people are trying to contextualise or conceptualise or theorise these things away. They won't go away. Once you've got swastikas on the streets of Britain, and you've got people trying to make excuses for that kind of imagery, then we're finished. And just to come back to Matthew's point, again, I understand what he's saying, but it's not just about seeing particular things. There's a spirit here, there's a spirit abroad, which is incredibly worrying. There's a sensibility, and the sensibility is totalitarianism, it's authoritarian, it's cutting down the opposition, it's sneering, it's horrible, it's cruel. I've been involved in, you know, culture wars for a long time. I get angry about things. I'm not only angry now, I'm frightened. I'm frightened for my friends, I'm frightened for my country, I'm frightened for my family. And I'm frightened for myself. I'm the first to admit it.
Yeah, okay, briefly to you, Matthew.
Just quickly, what happens in totalitarian states is they ban peaceful protests, and I will say, the majority of it seemed to be peaceful. And I will say again, swastikas, any form of anti-Semitism, should be clamped down on immediately.
Yeah, Suzanne, quickly to you.
Yeah, I think this is the issue, isn't it? Hamas wouldn't think twice about banning anything it didn't like and potentially shooting people on sight as well. They are, as we've all agreed, I think, terrorists. It's a very fine line to draw.
So very briefly, Suzanne Evans, then, should we ban all these pro-Palestinian protests, yes or no?
No, but we need to be a hell of a lot
and Matthew Stadden, yes or no?
No.
And Dr. Philip Kinsley, yes or no?
Yes.
Ban them. All right, well, thank you so much to Suzanne Evans, Matthew Stadlen, and also Philip Kinsley. Have I said that right, Philip, by the way? How do I say that? Kissily, thank you very much. All right, thank you so much to you. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, we'll continue with the great British debate this hour, and I'm asking, should we ban pro-Palestinian demonstrations? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, Christine Hamilton and Matthew Laza. Still to come, this week's Outside. My special celebrity guest is known as a competitive swimmer. He's also a patron for the Anaphylaxis campaign, the UK charity for some with people with severe allergies. Can anyone guess who he might be? Stay tuned, find out more. But first, let's get your latest news with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Nana. It's 4:31. Our top stories. Humza Yousaf's in-laws have arrived back in Scotland after being trapped in Gaza for more than 3 weeks. Mr Yousaf confirmed the news on X and posted a photo of the reunion, saying he's pleased they're back home safely. The Foreign Office is pressing for the Rafah crossing to reopen to allow UK nationals to escape Gaza. Egypt announced the suspension of evacuations following a deadly attack on an ambulance. Boris Johnson has visited a kibbutz as he continues his tour of Israel in a show of solidarity. The former Prime Minister, who arrived in the country this morning, made the trip alongside former Australian PM Scott Morrison. Earlier, they met IDF soldiers in Jerusalem. Later, Mr Johnson is expected to meet Israeli President Isaac Herzog. Well, into breaking news. Thames Water has declared a major incident in Godalming in Surrey after Storm Kieran. The bad weather conditions have caused issues at Shalford water treatment works, affecting local water supplies. Thames Water says they're working to restore those supplies to the area. In the meantime, they're providing bottled water. GB News understands some stores are actually starting to sell out as residents bolster their own supplies. And the Hamburg airport hostage situation has ended. It's after an armed 35-year-old man used a vehicle to break through security and onto the runway, where he held his 4-year-old daughter hostage for 18 hours. German police say it's likely a custody dispute. The suspect was arrested without resistance and the child is unharmed. You can find more on all of those stories on our website, gbnews.com. Now let's get straight back to Nana.
Well, coming up, it's Worldview time. We'll cross live to Los Angeles and Tel Aviv to get the latest on what's going on around the world. But up next, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, should we ban the pro-Palestinian demonstrations? I've got a poll up right now on X asking you that very question. Should we ban the pro-Palestinian protests? Send me your emails, gbviews@gbnews.com, or tweet me at gbnews.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the dinosaur hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good afternoon, 37 minutes after 4 o'clock. If you've just tuned in, welcome on board. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Now it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, should we ban the pro-Palestinian demonstrations? The fighting might be in the Middle East, but it affects us here in this country. Thousands of pro-Palestinian protests have gathered in London yesterday, calling for a ceasefire in Gaza for a third successive week. Deputy Prime Minister Oliver Dowden says that there's been hateful conduct at such demonstrations. Tensions have also been rising everywhere weekend as the marches continue. So what do you think? For the Great British Debate, I'm asking, should we ban the pro-Palestinian demonstrations? I mean, they do that in places like France. They are banned. Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, and also former Labour advisor Matthew Larser. Christine, I'm coming to you first. What are your thoughts on all of this?
Well, every fibre of my being and any decent person's being is not to ban anything like that, because we believe in free speech. It's what we fought world wars for, etc. And people have died for the ability of other people to express their views, even if you disagree with them. But I think what I find so objectionable is their threat to march towards the cenotaph, the Remembrance weekend, and I find that so deliberately provocative. Why? There's only one reason why. It's to create, I think, major disruption. They're probably itching for a bit of a fight to go on, and I think it's one of the most sacred parts of the British calendar, and I think the fact that they've chosen to do that rules them out of court, frankly, and I would ban that march. I would say...
Just that one,
if you're going to march towards the cenotaph, no, you're not. Go elsewhere. March on another day, go elsewhere. They don't have to come via the cenotaph, do they? I know it's the sort of centre of life.
But you could say that about anybody who sets up a protest. The idea of any protest is usually to draw attention. So you'd have a protest on a time, even like strikes are a protest. Those type of things are done specifically to cause aggravation and effect.
But don't you think they've caused enough already? And actually, this one particular march, I would absolutely ban them from coming into central London. I'm afraid I would. And it goes against my basic philosophy, which is freedom of speech, obviously.
Matthew Larser.
Well, I'm on the left of politics, but I spent my entire life desperately trying to avoid going on marches partly because they often end in trouble.
A good march is fun.
I think you may have been on more than me, Christine. No. I think I've been on one. But in all seriousness, my understanding is that they always have to be licensed. They always have to, for health and safety reasons, quite sensible ones, and also because, particularly, you cannot keep repeating the same march in the same place every week. It's not a right to have, once you've made your point, to keep making it to the exclusion of other things. Let's remind ourselves that the nation is making a point in remembering its war dead next week. I live just over Westminster Bridge. The Whitehall, where the cenotaph is closed for much of the weekend, quite rightly so, etc. So I think, yes, absolutely, this is inappropriate and does the cause a disservice. That's the other thing. It gets in people's backs up so much. So there should be no marching for anything next week. It's the weekend where there's no politics. It's the weekend where MPs of all parties come. It's the one absolutely unbreakable thing that you don't do politics on Remembrance Day. No. You go and you pay your respects.
So why did your Labour mayor then? He would have been part of that licensing procedure. Why would he have sanctioned it?
Well, I think initially it's fine to. It was initially fine to have one. And of course,
why on that day?
Sanction for this. If Khan's sanction for this weekend, he's wrong. He's wrong to have done that. Initially, when they sanctioned the first one and the cenotaph was used and they expected people just to walk past it, and remember there have been lots of causes that have walked past there, lefty causes, more, and they haven't, and everybody's paid respect. And what they did is they set up a stage right by the cenotaph. I would have said, once you've done that, you've broken the rules, you can't march down here again. You go to a park, but you can't march down there because we gave you permission and you broke the trust that we put in you.
Exactly. To me, they forfeited their right.
That's it. I was trying to think of the right word.
Therefore,
Forfeited
they should
is the right
not
word.
do it. When you think who comes to the cenotaph, never mind all the people who are watching it on television, the ex-servicemen, the war widows, people like that. I mean, I can't be the only person. I cannot watch that service on television.
You're certainly not. The war widows always say...
And you just, it is so deeply moving. It is so precious to... I'm about to cry now thinking about it. It is so precious to British people. I mean, how dare they? How dare they?
And it's so not political. It's people of all backgrounds, all traditions, and crucially, of course, it's not just remembering people in Britain, but it's remembering all the people in the Commonwealth, including actually people from Palestine.
But OK, so then...
As it was called then.
So your view is that you would simply just ban this one, but you wouldn't ban all of them.
I would ban this one, and then I would relocate them. I would ban them from the route that they've been taking because they've abused that route. They've forfeited the right, as Christine says. Marches in the past have been restricted to parks. You can have a protest. You can set a stage up in a park, and then it's much easier for the police to... Do you remember in austerity when there was a bit of a vogue for marches and we had the kettling? Do you remember when that became the word of the thing? We haven't seen much of that, have we? Students got kettled calling for, you know, no grants.
Christine.
Yeah. Well, I think that the police are frightened is probably the wrong word, but I mean, certainly if you're a police woman, you're in the middle of one of those marches surrounded by pretty fearsome people, I mean, I would hesitate before going in and trying to arrest them. I think it's a really frightening situation for the police, frankly.
Absolutely. Well, let's see what the viewers think, because this show is nothing without you. So let's get your views. Let's welcome our great British voices onto the show. Their opportunity to be on the show and tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. Where should we go this hour? Ooh, where should we go? Should we head over to... Where's my little map gone? Have I not even got the map these days?
It's been cut.
Let's go to Southampton. What's going on?
They had to pay for the new mugs, Nana.
Tom, nice to see you. We do usually have a nice little map that will do a little flight towards you, but it doesn't matter. Tom, nice to welcome on board. What do you think about this? Should we ban... I mean, I'm saying ban all of them, but what do you think?
Good afternoon, Nana. To ban them would desecrate the cenotaph itself, because the people that fought and died to keep our freedoms. However, you can't allow people to think that it's okay to desecrate that monument, that they can walk past there and shout in hate and spite and being malicious towards one another past such a great monument. I don't believe the one that's planned for next weekend should be permitted to go. Now, they can turn around and shout and say that's unfair, that's undemocratic. But everything I've witnessed from the weekend of the atrocities to today's date is abhorrent to me. I spent a few years in the armed forces, then a firefighter for 30 years, and I've seen horrendous sights. But what I witnessed on that weekend was disgusting. And anyone who wants to march in support of Hamas really needs to give their head a bit of a wobble.
Well, some of them might argue they're supporting and they're being pro-Palestinian, but Suella Braverman, do you think Suella's right to call them hate-filled marches?
I think the majority of people, like we know, 99% of this world are nice people, and they're doing something because they believe what they're doing to be correct and right. I do, however, believe that the spite and malice that's being pushed into these marches are for other reasons. For anyone who wants peace, to stop war, to want to walk past the cenotaph and cause trouble, tells me the story of why they're doing it. It's not about peace. It's not about the poor people that are being blown up in Gaza. There is more to this than we know, maybe.
Yeah, Tom Cromwell, thank you very much. Beautifully done. That's Tom Cromwell. He's my great British voice this afternoon. Thank you, Tom. Lovely to speak to you. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, it's this week's Outside. I'm joined by a former Olympic swimmer. He's a celebrity guest. He's been a competitive swimmer for many years. He's competed in the Olympics. He's also been a contestant on Strictly Come Dancing. His best events include the 50 metres butterfly and 50 metres freestyle. And he's also involved in charity work. I'm sure lots of you have guessed who he is. I'm sure you have. But first, let's get some weather.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Generally, east is best for any Bonfire Night celebrations you're attending this evening. Eastern areas will hold on to largely dry conditions and clear intervals throughout. But in the west, we do have some showers to watch out for, particular focus across parts of northwest England. They'll be around the Bristol Channel Way as well. It's the second half of the night beginning to fringe into parts of Sussex and Kent as well. But generally still a lot of dry, clear conditions around, and underneath that some mist and fog will form, and it will also turn quite chilly, particularly for eastern Scotland, where we certainly can expect some frost to develop. As we head into Monday, it is overall another day of sunshine and showers. Those showers most frequent in the west once again, could be heavy at times, maybe with some thunderstorms and some hail as well. Still some sunshine in the mix, but the most prolonged sunshine will be for eastern areas, but a few showers just beginning to migrate their way across into eastern England later on in the afternoon. A breezy day overall, but temperatures around where we expect them for the time of year, between 10 and 14 degrees Celsius. As we head into Tuesday, it will start off fairly showery once again, but this ridge of high pressure is then going to start pushing its way in across the UK. So the showers will ease off, the winds will turn lighter as well, and into the afternoon, generally, things will turn drier for a lot of areas, and there will be some sunny spells around to enjoy. For Wednesday, though, we start to see a more widespread band of rain beginning to sweep its way in, but into the second half of the week, Thursday, Friday, the showers return once again. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Right, so you're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. Coming up in the next hour, it's time for the Great British Debate. I'm asking, is the COVID inquiry a waste of time? But next, it's Worldview, as we get the latest on what's going on in Israel. And, of course, I'll be speaking to Foreign Policy Advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister, Dr. Ophir Falk. Stay tuned.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows...
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Good afternoon, this is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. Welcome on board. It's time now for Worldview. 88 British nationals have been prevented from crossing the border into Egypt. Officials temporarily closed the Rafah crossing after accusations swirled about Hamas infiltration amongst the injured. So joining me to talk about the conflict is Foreign Policy Advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister, Dr. Ophir Falk. Dr. Ophir, thank you very much for coming, for talking to me regarding to this. So Could you sort of give us an update? Because I know you recently had a meeting with Boris Johnson. How did that go?
Thank you for having me, Nana. Actually, Boris Johnson and Scott Morrison called up the Prime Minister just recently, earlier today, to show a strong sign of support. We appreciate that support. The Prime Minister thanked them for being with Israel and, more importantly, being in Israel, showing strong support.
Now, can you give us an update then? What's the latest from Tel Aviv?
Well, the latest is that we are close to 3.5 weeks into this war, a war that was waged against us by Hamas on October 7th, when they outleashed the worst terrorist attack ever on the Jewish people. They infiltrated Israel, butchering, killing, murdering 1,400 people, killing kids in front of their parents, killing parents in front of their children, tying up children, burning babies alive. And now we're taking the war back to them. We're waging war on Hamas, and we will destroy Hamas. Israel is fully united like never before in this mission of destroying Hamas. Israel is united. The government is united. The cabinet is united in one goal, and one goal only: to destroy Hamas. And we appreciate the strong support we're receiving from our allies, from the United States, from the United Kingdom, from all our allies, both moral and material support. And this is a moment of moral clarity. Either you're with civilization. This is a battle of civilization against these barbaric savages from Hamas, and we will destroy Hamas.
Now, you talked about a lot of the support which you are getting, but you're also getting a lot of pressure for a ceasefire or a pause in the fighting. How realistic is that?
Well, a ceasefire is it's ridiculous. There is not going to be any ceasefire. Asking for a ceasefire would be like asking America to ceasefire after Al-Qaeda attacked them on 9/11. This is actually 10 times worse than 9/11 for Israel. It's like the equivalent of 50,000 Americans being killed in one day. It's the equivalent of 14,000 British people being killed in one day. It's not going to happen. We're going to destroy Hamas, and we actually appreciate the support we're receiving from the UK. It's the greatest support we've ever received from the UK. It's greater than the Balfour Declaration 106 years ago, and we clearly thank you for that.
Yeah, and of course, a lot of other countries, you're seeing a lot of protests in other countries, and they're pro-Palestinian protests. That must be quite difficult to watch and see.
Well, as I said, clearly, this is a moment of moral clarity. Either you're with civilization or you're with these barbarian, savage Hamas terrorists. I think that a lot of the people demonstrating today are misinformed. There's a lot of disinformation out there. I don't think anybody on the street that is walking on the street with a sane mind and a sane heart would side with somebody who beheads children and burns babies alive. I mean, I don't think any human being can be on that side. So again, this is a moment of moral clarity, and I think everybody should be on Israel's side. And I think that, in fact, is the case. Everybody who with a straight mind and a moral heart is with Israel. And just to make another clarification, Israel is acting in complete compliance with international law, and all the civilian casualties are on Hamas's hands. All the civilian casualties are on Hamas's hands. All right. We have been urging civilians to get out of harm's way from the outset. We've waited 3 weeks for civilians to get out of harm's way, to go to the southwest of Gaza, to get out of harm's way as Israel destroys Hamas. Thankfully, about 800,000 Gazans have gone down to the southwest. The Hamas is doing everything they can to block these civilians from getting out of harm's way, at gunpoint, and sometimes even shooting them at sometimes. And we're urging them to get out of harm's way. So all of these civilians that are being tragically caught up in the fire, all those civilians are on Hamas's hands. We're doing everything possible. Israel is doing everything possible to minimize civilian casualties, and Hamas is seeking to maximize while they hide behind and below these civilians.
Well, they're doing the opposite. Dr. Ophir Fox, thank you very much for speaking to me. He's the foreign policy advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Thank you very much. Right, let's travel over to America now. Let's have a chat with Paul Dudridge, the host of the Politics People podcast. Let's find out what's going on. Trump is upstaging DeSantis in his own state. Talk to me about it, Paul. We haven't got much time with you, sadly, but tell me all about it.
No, it's OK. I'll talk quick. A Republican Party summit yesterday in Florida. That should be a triumphal return for DeSantis. He's the governor of Florida. Trump completely wiped the floor with him, and everybody that was dissenting against Trump. Chris Christie got booed on that stage, but DeSantis really might as well not have turned up at all. I think Trump described him as like a poor little bird falling from the skies. It's DeSantis must get out of this race. He's only polling 13%, and he can't even win in his own state at the moment, of which he is the governor. He's the governor of Florida, and Trump announced yesterday that he was filing to be nominated in Florida. Got a huge cheer at a Republican Party summit. So it wasn't a Trump rally, but it may as well have been.
Now, you're also having what we have here, lots of pro-Palestinian protests. Talk to me about those, because you had some in New York, Chicago, over 100,000 people, and also in Washington, D.C.
100,000 people in Washington, D.C. yesterday, Chicago, New York, 100,000 people in Washington, D.C. They tried breaching the gates of the White House. There was damage to the White House, the perimeter fence, and they tried breaching the fence, but they will not be treated as insurrectionists. That's apparently only Trump supporters on January the 6th. Anybody trying to climb into the White House, damaging that, they're going to be treated absolutely as just free speech advocates. But yes, we're having exactly the same reaction and divisions here as you seem to be experiencing.
And briefly, Joe Biden, apparently some people are turning on him, accusing him of supporting the Palestinians. Is that right?
Yeah, I want to get the wording right. Rashida Tlaib, again, Keir Starmer-like, anybody on the left now, you're starting to see the true divisions come out. Rashida Tlaib, his own congresswoman from Michigan, accuses Joe Biden of supporting the genocide of Palestinians. That's his own team. And that's the division that we're talking about. You're seeing it with Keir Starmer. You're seeing it now with Joe Biden.
Listen, thank you so much, Paul Dudred, host of the Politics People podcast. Good as ever. Thank you, Paul. Stay tuned. Loads more to come in the next hour. It's 5 o'clock. This is GB News, We Are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. Coming up, the great British debate. I'm asking, is the COVID inquiry a waste of time? On the way, of course, my mystery guest for Outside. But first, let's get your latest news with Ray Addison.
Good afternoon. It's coming up to 1 minute past 5. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Our top stories. Boris Johnson has visited a kibbutz as he continues his tour of Israel in a show of solidarity. The former Prime Minister, who arrived in the country this morning, made the trip alongside former Australian PM Scott Morrison. The kibbutz they visited was attacked by Hamas on October 7th. Earlier, the two former leaders met IDF soldiers in Jerusalem. Later, Mr Johnson is expected to meet Israeli President Isaac Herzog. Boris Johnson acknowledged that there is a rise in anti-Semitic behaviour globally.
There's been no single attack like this on the Jewish people since the Second World War, and that's a matter of record. And you know what? I think that that may be because across the world, the memory and the lesson of that appalling crime, and 6 million died, the memory may be starting to fade. And it may be that what we're really seeing now in some of these marches and these demos and the unthinking way people are talking about this issue, well, we're starting to see perhaps, I really hope this isn't the case, but you're seeing more and more evidence of anti-Semitism.
Humza Yousaf's in-laws have arrived back in Scotland after being trapped in Gaza for more than 3 weeks. Scotland's First Minister confirmed the news on X and posted a photo of the reunion, saying he's pleased they're back home safely. The Foreign Office is pressing for the Rafah crossing to reopen to allow UK nationals to escape Gaza. Egypt announced the suspension of evacuations following a deadly attack on an ambulance. Antony Blinken is in Turkey to continue humanitarian talks with foreign ministers. It's after the US Secretary of State met with the Palestinian president in Ramallah in the West Bank. President Abbas told him an immediate ceasefire is needed. The pair also discussed getting more aid into Gaza and efforts to restore stability to the West Bank. Well, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, have expressed concern about further pro-Palestine protests during Armistice Day. The Met Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, has promised to take a robust approach and to use all the powers available to ensure commemorative events are not undermined. Deputy PM Oliver Dowden says Armistice Day should be about honouring the sacrifices made by previous generations.
I have really grave concerns about this, and I think that certainly representing a large Jewish community as I do, but it's broader than the Jewish community. We should be honouring and respecting the sacrifice made by previous generations, and you certainly shouldn't have the kind of intimidation that you see in those marches.
Well, meanwhile, Shadow Defence Secretary John Healey says we live in a democracy and must balance the right to protest.
It's an operational decision for the police. They are talking to the protest organisers who want to show their solidarity with Palestinians, and they're looking at a different place in London at a time 2 hours after the Remembrance service at the Cenotaph. And I hope we'll be able to get to a situation where we're not banning the right of protest, but we're absolutely ensuring that the remembrance, recognition and honour of those people who've served and fallen to defend us in this country is fully respected.
Thames Water has declared a major incident in Godalming in Surrey after Storm Ciarán. The bad weather conditions have caused issues at Shalford water treatment works affecting local water supplies. Thames Water say they're working to restore those supplies to the area. In the meantime, they're providing bottled water. GB News understands that some stores are starting to sell out as residents bolster their own supplies. The Hamburg airport hostage situation has ended. It's after an armed 35-year-old man used a vehicle to break through security and onto the runway, where he held his 4-year-old daughter hostage for 18 hours. German police saying it's likely a custody dispute. The suspect was arrested without resistance. The child is unharmed. And Prince William is in Singapore to attend the 2023 Earthshot Prize ceremony. The Prince of Wales will host the United for Wildlife Global Summit in conjunction with his Earthshot environmental initiative. He hopes to shine a spotlight on Southeast Asia's role in the illegal wildlife trade. The Earthshot Awards on Tuesday will see 5 category winners presented with £1 million each to scale up their environmental ideas. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying, play GB News. Let's get back to Nana.
Thank you, Ray. It's just coming up to 6 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is Christine Hamilton and also Matthew Larza. Still to come each Sunday at 5, I'm joined by a celebrity, a former MP or someone who's had an extremely interesting career to take a look at life after the job. We talk highs, lows and lessons learned and what comes next on the outside. Now, my celebrity guest is known as a competitive swimmer and has competed in the Olympics. He's also been a contestant on Strictly Come Dancing. His best events include the 50 metres butterfly and 50 metres freestyle. And he's also involved in charity work, so I'm sure you've worked it out now. Come on. Our special guest will be here in just a moment. Then for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is the COVID inquiry a waste of time with all these WhatsApp messages? I mean, this week we've had explosive evidence, shocking revelations and plenty of fruity language, as well as key figures claiming number 10 was a centre of indecision and chaos. But hey, who didn't know that? But are they actually asking the right questions around COVID? Or is it all so Westminster bubble self-obsessed? We'll be discussing that. And as ever, you can get in touch. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews. Now, though, it's time for this week's Outside, where we talk highs, lows and lessons learned and what comes next on the outside. My special guest is known for competitive swimming and has represented this country in the Olympics, the World Championships and the Commonwealth Games. He became the fastest swimmer in the country by the age of 15, though I'm not surprised he's very tall. Sorry. And he's considered to be one of the most successful swimmers in Britain. He's now 53, although he does not look that old, I can tell you that now. He's won 6 World Championships, 2 Commonwealth titles and 11 European titles during his career. His best events, as I said before, include 50 metres butterfly and 50 metres freestyle. And following his swimming career, he made several celebrity guest appearances on various different programmes, one of which was Strictly the Weakest Link through the Keyhole. Not only that, but he's remained in the spotlight. He's also thrown himself into some charity work. I'm pleased to say, I know you've guessed it, I'm joined by former Olympic swimmer Mark Foster. Hello, Mark.
Hello.
When you hear
my agent, that was brilliant.
I was going to say, when you hear all that, you must think, God, I'm good.
That was fantastic. Well, it was a misspent youth. You know, I kind of found something that I was good at, and I got slightly obsessed by it, and then that led to wanting to represent my country at the Olympic Games, and then I had the career I did.
Who got you into that, though? Was it that one day somebody saw how good you were, or...?
I went for swimming lessons like everybody, because swimming's a life skill. My father couldn't swim, so he was determined myself and my sisters would learn. And I went down to the local pool, which is Warrior Square Swimming Pool in Southend, which is no longer there. It's a car park.
I know.
But fortunately, at the time, there was a pool there, and my swimming teacher was a lady called Mrs Hardcastle. And Mrs Hardcastle was the mother of a girl called Sarah Hardcastle, who went to the Olympics in 1984 and won a silver and bronze medal. So she basically had a good eye, saw something in me. I was very competitive, even though I was like a little 5-year-old learning to swim. Always wanted to get to the other side first. And she said to me at the end of my course of my swimming lessons, why don't you go and join the swim club? And that's where it sort of started, really.
Oh, but don't you ever think, I don't want to get my hair wet, I don't want to,
No.
Isn't it all like a bit of a pain? I mean, I've got off, I'm like, oh, God, take my wig off now.
I think some of these things, though, when you kind of like find something that something you enjoy, something you feel very comfortable doing. And for me, I always say this to people, it's about finding your tribe somewhere you fit in.
That's true.
I used to love the swim club, and the sight, the sound, the feel of the water, I just used to love it. When I got in there, my head was under the water, it was kind of like it was a therapeutic.
It is, actually. I mean, swimming is very therapeutic, I'll say that. I mean, I do my aqua, and I can swim now, even though I didn't think I could, and then I realised my mistake was simply not breathing out when my head was underwater, so I'd hold my breath. So when I came out, I just like...
That is the most common thing people say to me about the breathing thing.
Yeah.
They really struggle with it. And I know it's like anything, when you understand it and it makes sense, it's obvious. But I will say to people, I know when we do breathing skills, which is breathe in the air, blow bubbles in the water, because obviously what you're meant to do is breathe in the air, blow out in the water, breathe in the air, because you see a lot of people swinging, going, and they're just exhausted by the end of the
that's what it was. But then after I did that, I was able to swim about, I think it was 20 lengths for 25 metre pool.
good.
Straight away, because I had a really nice stroke. I'd watched a lot, but I could only do 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then that was it. And I was out of time.
When you're not in fear, you switch off and you enjoy it.
Oh, it's great.
Don't you? You don't have to... I think at first when you're learning, you're in fear of, something going on. You're in fear of whatever you're in fear of. And then when you kind of go, actually, I kind of got this a bit, you just let go.
Well, it was an adult swimming thing, actually, and I found it... I shouldn't say I found it quite amusing, but there were people who were scared of going into the water, like grown adults, and you saw them going... and it's like, yeah, but your feet will touch the bottom. And like, and it was hilarious. And I'm like, what's wrong with you? Just climb in. Your head's going to be about... They wouldn't go in the water. I shouldn't laugh, but I did.
Well, I wouldn't go in the water after I watched Jaws.
Oh, yeah, no, I don't blame you.
No, Jaws came out in 1975 in the cinema, but I can't remember when I saw it on TV. But I remember watching that, and I used to swim along and look at the grate at the bottom of the pool and go, he's in there. And then I'm from Southend, and when I swam in, which is obviously the Thames, I used to look around the surface of the water and I could hear that.
Oh, my God, no.
Weird. And it stuck with me.
Well, that would make you swim a bit faster, but that wouldn't be... I wouldn't be doing that.
Maybe that's what the secret was.
That was it. What do you think about all this sort of trans thing? So you've got people like Leah Thomas, who is a man, a biological man, swimming with the women who are biological women. Do you think that sport needs to have a real think about this?
I think it is. From where it started to where we got now, I'm not saying we are where we need to be. I try and look at a level playing field, and I think that women for years have struggled for the right to vote, first of all. I'm going back years.
Yeah.
But obviously now, and I look at trying to look at fairness. Well, I know if you take a biological man who's transitioned into a woman, your bone density, your muscles, your strength, you've got a massive advantage. And I don't think it's fair. So I think if the way forward would be, you have a male category, biological male, female, and then a trans category.
Yeah, that seems quite obvious. And why do you think that they're sort of holding back on this? Because he was even sharing the toilets and the changing facilities with the women. So, you know, I remember, I don't know whether it was Riley Gaines or one of them saying that, yeah, we had to change with a grown biological man with everything still intact in the same dressing room. I mean,
I guess it was, well, when it first happened, Leah Thomas, for argument's sake, because that's the first time I heard of it, and you're taking someone that was 500th in America, the 500-yard freestyle, and the men transitioned and then won the women's.
And even had to pretend to slow down. You could see that he slowed down at the end so that it didn't look so bad.
But I think because it was the sort of first case, it was like, you know what it's kind of like at the beginning with anything, people don't say or don't do something in fear of saying the wrong thing. And I kind of get it. But at the same, that's why I think by having these conversations and by people trying to work out a solution, we'll get there. But unfortunately, it's like with anything, we don't get there like that. It doesn't happen straight away.
Well, to me, that was pretty obvious. I don't understand what took them so long. It's quite straightforward, really. You can't have somebody like that competing against the women because sport is about bodies, isn't it? It's about bodies, and we compare bodies, and you put people in categories based on that, and he's a man, so he shouldn't be going against the women.
Yep.
But you also do a lot of charity work, and I know that it's for anaphylaxis. Why did you choose that particular charity? Why are you going in that direction?
I worked with World Child for a number of years, and I've done a golf day for World Child for terminally ill children. And then the anaphylaxis campaign came around because people get anaphylactic shock through nut allergies, bee stings. And a friend of mine, Ross Bailey, was training in Bath in 1999. I was training with Colin Jackson at the time as well. And he basically went to a sandwich shop with me to get a sandwich at lunchtime. And I eat anything, and I'm a pig. And I had a sandwich, and he went, I'll have the same sandwich. Now, I didn't know he had a nut allergy, but it was common knowledge, but I didn't know. But we sat down, ate the sandwich, and he spat out, and he went, there's nuts in there. And I went, oh. And he went, I've got a nut allergy. And I went, oh, OK. And he goes, it's OK. I'll be OK. And he took his Ventolin, and this went on for about 15, 20 minutes. He kept coughing, being sick. And I went, are you OK? And he went, I'm OK. It'll be gone in a minute. And he was very, very sure that he was going to be OK. He had an EpiPen, but that was at home. And it got to the point I kept going, look, you're going red in the face. Are you sure you're all right? And I didn't think... He didn't want to put me out.
Oh.
But then eventually, I think it triggered in him, and he went, hang on, this is normally subsided by now and gone away, and I'm normally OK. And I drove him and rushed him up to the hospital, and they gave him injections, and basically it was too late. They put him into a coma, induced a coma, and he died sort of a couple of days later.
Oh, so sad.
My thing was, I'd taken someone that, a very, very close friend, someone that was incredibly fit. He was going to be the next Colin Jackson in sprint world hurdling, and someone that was so small that could take someone out. And I was petrified, frightened.
Yeah. And so what are you sort of focusing on now, then?
What do I focus on now? I do a lot of, I want to say, public speaking, sort of inspirational stuff. I mean, I do a lot of prize givings with kids. I go into a lot of public sector or private companies and try and, I don't know, I try and get people to think a little bit differently. And I think the thing is one thing that sport teaches you that you do. So I don't believe in. Like, if you think of the word fail, from action I learn. You do something, get a result, learn from it, go again, go again, go again. Don't get stuck on the I failed and don't do it again. And that's one of the things from a very early age, from the age of 6, that I got up there and I did a race. I saw the board and I went, OK, I want to go faster. And it didn't always go to plan. I got it more wrong than I did right. And that was one of my big lessons. Get up and go again and get up and go again, because you're trying to create perfection, but perfection never happens, but you just keep trying to get perfect.
Yeah, keep trying for perfection. I obviously don't need to try.
Good ending.
Mark Foster, thank you very much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
That is, of course, the brilliant Mark Foster, Olympic swimmer, fabulous person all round, and he was my outside guest. Right, well, stay with me. It's just coming up to 17 minutes after 5 o'clock. I've got an explosive minute debate on the way about whether we should ban the selling of fireworks. But up next, it's time for the Great British Debate, and I'm asking, is the COVID inquiry a waste of time?
Who is it? We're here for the show.
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 21 minutes after 5 o'clock. If you've just tuned in, welcome on board. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. Don't forget, you can also stream the show live on YouTube. It's time, though, now for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is the COVID inquiry a waste of time? Now, this week, we've heard explosive evidence, shocking revelations and plenty of fruity language, as well as key figures claiming Number 10 was the centre of indecision and chaos. Oh, surprise, surprise. Who knew? A former head of the NHS England asserted that the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, wanted to decide who should live or die, and if the NHS was overwhelmed, and override the guidance of medical professionals. Dominic Cummings didn't pull any punches, calling the Cabinet Office completely dysfunctional and claiming that Boris Johnson was distracted by his personal life. And with an expected cost of over £100 million for the inquiry, yeah, are they asking the right questions? And will it actually solve anything? So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is the COVID inquiry actually a waste of time. I'm joined now by Peter Spencer, former political correspondent, Stephen Pound, former Labour MP, and Lois Perry, political commentator. Right, I'm going to start with you, Lois Perry. You're in the studio. Go for it.
Well, I mean, it's not a waste of time. It's a complete dereliction of duty. They're deliberately avoiding all the actual real questions that should be asked. Like, for example, why was there never any cost-benefit analysis done of the impact of lockdowns? Were mask mandates ever scientifically proven? What were the lessons learned from Sweden, where they never followed any of this advice whatsoever and actually ended up with the lowest lowest excess death rate in Europe?
But with Sweden probably don't have such an obesity crisis in their country, do they? So I think you need to take some of these things into account.
Well, absolutely, you have to take everything into account. But the thing is, they're not taking it into account, Nana, because they're not asking those particular questions. And you've got Matt Hancock, who's got immunity from prosecution. I mean, why would you need to have immunity from prosecution if you had nothing to hide? The whole thing seems to be a way of making the Conservative Party look disunited, which admittedly is not hard, and having a go at Boris Johnson, who seems to be a sacrificial lamb from this whole thing. It's a whitewash.
Well, let's go to Peter Spencer. Peter.
There's been a great deal of blame game going on, of course, and a great deal of emphasis on the beanie-hatted fashionista. I think you know who I'm talking about, the guy who fell out with Boris somewhat when he's a colourful language. But behind all that, there is the reality that the British government, along with every other government in the world, was faced with a crisis of extraordinary proportions, a pandemic which rivaled the Spanish flu epidemic, which killed more people than World War I. So it's not to be wondered at that the British government, along with all the rest, was in a complete Harry Tate. However, what I think matters out of all this is the way forward. Now, there seems to be something like a consensus among scientists that it's not a matter of if, but when we get another pandemic of this nature. What needs to be addressed and what we hope will come out of the inquiry will be a serious, rigorous look at the structures of government, the lines of communication, and the methods of responding to things, to make sure we don't get it quite so wrong next time.
But we all want that, but they don't seem to be asking those questions. I mean, I haven't really heard anything of that nature. Stephen Pound.
It's always easier in life to find a scapegoat than it is to find a solution. And I think the problem we've got here is that we're concentrating on individuals and individuals' malfeasance and some of their, frankly, foul behaviour, let alone the language. And we're not actually looking at the structure that let us down in this country. Yeah. I'm very attracted by the Swedish model, where they had an analysis within 3 months. It came in on time, on budget, and it came up with a list of possible and probable conclusions. I sat in on the Savile inquiry into Bloody Sunday that lasted for 12 years. I have a horrible feeling that we could end up with an inquiry into the COVID inquiry. But look, it's like lifting a manhole cover and looking into the sewer, to be honest. Look, the reality is, Nana, we knew that the people weren't functioning at the complete heights of probity. What are we actually gaining from this? We're wasting a lot of money. But the ultimate thing is the failure of politicians who always say something must be done. Let's have an inquiry. What let's have an inquiry translates perfectly simply into the following words. Let's kick it into the long grass.
I think it translates into the words, lessons will be learned, which is always the word.
100 million quid later.
You say that, but it was 100 million quid. That's what they're spending on it, Lois.
No, I know, it's unbelievable. But it's like, why has it taken so long for an inquiry to happen when, as you say, the other countries have had their inquiries done and dusted? It's politically expedient for somebody or something or some sort of ideology for it to be dragging out or to be happening now. But who's benefiting from making the Conservative Party look ridiculous and disunited and all of that stuff? I mean, wasn't it our government that actually called the inquiry? It's it's pretty crazy, to be honest. Yeah.
Peter, what do you think? Are you feeling that we're getting a sense of real questions being answered, or do you feel that they are literally wasting our money and time?
The inquiry is a long way from finished yet. I mean, I entirely take Stephen's point about the lessons must be learnt. Let us hope, at very least, some element of this inquiry, when it finally reports, will indeed reveal the answer to some of those lessons and actually provide solutions but next time round.
But when will they get round to asking those questions, Stephen? Because I'm waiting, and so far it's some swearing from Dominic Cummings. It's a lot of swearing, some insults about Boris. It's got, it's just like, when are they going to be asking about that? Because it's been going on for a while now. We haven't got to it yet.
Well, when I mentioned the Bloody Sunday inquiry, I mean, after we did 10 years of the Bloody Sunday inquiry, we had to then reconvene because a witness X, who couldn't give evidence earlier on, decided to give evidence. This could go on forever and ever, and it could go on into the middle of the next pandemic, for all we know. But look, the question is, what have we learned so far? We've learned that some of the people use industrial, lower decks language. We know that the place was dysfunctional. We know that Helen McNamara was an absolute genius who should have been put in charge of the whole civil service if Nana Akua wouldn't take the job. We've learned very, very, very little about it. But the really thing that worries me is that the reputation of the civil service, which once had the reputation of being the smooth-running Rolls-Royce administration, the place that ran the world, is now looking utterly and totally dysfunctional. The MPs it's a fairly low bar, let's be honest, but the MPs are looking pretty risible at best. So all we've done is we've washed our dirty laundry in public. We've made ourselves look stupid in the eyes of the world. And frankly, I think the sooner we take this outside, shoot it in the back of the head and bury it in an unmarked grave, the better.
Can I just say that I think the only compulsory vaccination that I'd ever have is against inquiries themselves.
Final word
Fair
to
point.
you, Peter.
I'll
Peter
take
Spencer. You get the last word, Peter.
I want Stephen to be wrong. I want something to come out of this.
So do I.
Maybe a restructuring. Yeah, but maybe restructuring the civil service. Maybe that we used to have Sir Humphrey, and then we had that rather more noisy fellow in the thick of it. What we need
Malcolm
is a civil
Tucker.
service that's got a little bit of that commands a little bit of respect and actually functions properly. That would help.
Well, listen, so I'll ask you each individually. Stephen Pound, then. So is the COVID inquiry, is it a waste of time?
Total.
Peter Spencer, is it a waste of time?
No.
No? And Lois Perry?
It's an omni-shambles.
So it is a waste of time. Thank you very much. Former political correspondent Stephen Pound, former Labour MP, and Lois Perry, political commentator. Thank you very much for your thoughts. Well, listen, lots of you have been getting in touch. We've been talking about lots of things this afternoon. One of them, we were talking about the march. Eileen says, I think it's abhorrent that there should be any march by Palestinian sympathisers next weekend. It should never have been okayed by whoever is in charge. Roger says all these marches should be banned now. Remembrance Parade is a national memorial service, and a memorial service is the same as a funeral service. You don't have the right to protest at memorial services or a funeral service. Mazza says, I don't know where, it states that our heroes gave their lives and made great sacrifices for free speech. Democracy means choice, and our government representatives speak for and protect the people. Well, thank you for those thoughts. Keep them coming. It's just coming up to 5:30. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, we'll continue our Great British debate this hour, and I'm asking, is the COVID inquiry a waste of time? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, Christine Hamilton and Matthew Laza, but first, let's get your latest news headlines with Ray Addison.
It's 5:30. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Boris Johnson has said there is a rise in anti-Semitic behaviour globally. The former Prime Minister made the statement while visiting a kibbutz as he continues his tour of Israel. Mr Johnson, who arrived in the country this morning, made the trip alongside former Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison. The kibbutz was attacked by Hamas on October the 7th. Humza Yousaf's in-laws have arrived back in Scotland after being trapped in Gaza for more than 3 weeks. The First Minister posted a photo on X and said he's glad they're back home safely. The Foreign Office is pressing for the Rafah crossing to reopen to allow UK nationals to escape Gaza. Egypt announced the suspension of evacuations following a deadly attack on an ambulance. Thames Water has declared a major incident in Godalming in Surrey after the effects of Storm Ciarán. The bad weather conditions have caused issues at Shalford water treatment works, affecting local supplies. Thames Water say they're working to restore those supplies to the area. In the meantime, they're providing bottled water. However, GB News understands some stores are starting to sell out of bottled water as residents bolster their own supplies. The Hamburg airport hostage situation has ended. It's after an armed 35-year-old man used a vehicle to break through security and onto the runway, where he held his 4-year-old daughter hostage for 18 hours. German police saying it's likely a custody dispute. The suspect was arrested without resistance. The child was unharmed. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now let's get back to Nana.
Thank you, Ray. It's just coming up to 33 minutes after 5 o'clock. Coming up, will we be going over some of the other things that have... I don't know what I'm talking about. Supplement Sunday is on the way. Stay tuned.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows...
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Good afternoon. If you just tuned in, where have you been? We've only got about 25 minutes left. It's OK. There's loads more here on GB News. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. It's time, though, for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is the COVID inquiry a waste of time? This week, we've heard loads of explosive evidence, shocking revelations and language that we really literally cannot repeat on air. Otherwise, we'll be shut down. Key figures claimed that number 10 was a centre of indecision and chaos, but I don't know why anybody thought that was a confusion. That's pretty obvious. Whilst the former head of NHS England asserted that the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, wanted to decide who should live or die. I mean, look at him, honestly. Dominic Cummings called the Cabinet Office completely dysfunctional and accused Boris Johnson of being distracted by his personal life. Well, I mean, I'm not surprised. He just got married, he just had a baby. Who wouldn't be? With an expected cost of over £100 million, it's the inquiry asking the right questions, and will it actually solve anything? So, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is the COVID inquiry actually turning out to be a waste of time? Well, let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, and also former Labour Party advisor Matthew Lauser. Matthew Lauser, the COVID inquiry.
So I think it is in danger of becoming obsessed with the politics. Now, look, for people like me, Labour supporters, it's entertaining to see the dirty washing of the Tory government in public. And I think there are certain revelations that are important. But I think what I thought the COVID inquiry was there to do was to find out what we did right, what we did wrong, and crucially, what we should do next time. Because let us remember, we hope there isn't going to be a similar pandemic, but, you know, we literally don't ever know. That's the nature of the beast. And therefore, what we need to know, you know, during the pandemic, most people on my side were in favour of locking down more. I was a bit more cautious. I looked at what the Social Democrat colleagues in Sweden, where I do a lot of work with them, they were taking a more blended approach. I'd like to know whether we should have done that. So, yes, OK, a bit of theatre, a bit of embarrassing Boris, but actually, for the 100 million, or at least, and it'll cost way more than that by the time it's finished, let's hope that we get a little more detail about what we should do next time.
Christine.
Well, it's, as you say, they're using words that you can't broadcast. It's words that most people don't use full stop. I mean, it's been absolutely horrendous. All it's been is Dominic Cummings getting off his chest what he feels about Boris and Carrie, etc. Do we need to know that? No.
We already knew it.
We already knew it. Very entertaining for Matthew and his cronies on the left, etc. Sorry, not cronies.
Oh,
colleagues.
It's OK. Colleagues.
No,
comrades.
Comrades is fine. All right. But no, a complete waste of time. I mean, the bloody Sunday inquiry, that is what it's called, by the way, in case anybody thinks I'm swearing.
No.
Known as the bloody Sunday inquiry, cost £190 million. It went on for 20 years. Now, hopefully this won't. What we need to know exactly is what you've touched upon. For example, most people, me included, thought that the first lockdown was right, not the second lockdown, etc. Sweden went on not to lock down, and we buckled under the pressure and the strain with all the ensuing problems. But no, we need to get on to the nitty-gritty about whether we took the right decisions, not necessarily...
And how the decisions were taken.
And how the decisions were taken, not who called what who and all this, that and the other. I mean, it's just been a...
You could have kind of dismissed that in an hour. I have to say, I mean, politics is a robust game, but I mean, I'm not just trying to be holier than thou. You know, I didn't see language like that when when I was working for the opposition.
Well, you weren't employing Dominic Cummings.
No, absolutely.
But so far, it's been obsessed with...
Can you imagine him as a boss?
Utterly obsessed with trivia. And let's get on to the meat. Otherwise, it's not worth the money.
Well, because...
And sorry to interrupt, there are so many lawyers involved. Everybody's got their team of lawyers. Now, I don't mind if they are paying for their lawyers, but the number of lawyers who are there that we're paying
I think we're paying for pretty much all of them. The taxpayer is paying for pretty much all of them.
Everybody, all the witnesses?
I think if they were in government service at the time, I would assume you because it relates to your government service.
Yeah, oh yes, if they were employed by the government at the time, but there are people coming from outside.
Oh yeah, some of those, if it's this thing called a designated, but I've forgotten the phrase, but there's a phrase, then you do get your legal fees paid.
The lawyers will be absolutely laughing all the way to the bank. It's the biggest...
Lawyers always do. But I want an inquiry that is going to, be completely honest. And again, we were talking about tribes earlier. It doesn't take everything was right on one side, everything was right on the other, but says what we should have done. I mean, actually, some of these things are really interesting, like the fact that number 10 itself is not suitable for use in a national emergency because it's a little Georgian house with pokey rooms. And actually, should they have, on the minute there was a crisis, should they all go to somewhere where they can actually look at each other, talk, have meeting rooms like a normal workplace? Things like that rather than the WhatsApps.
Well, I mean, look, this is one thing. Johnson's former Director of Communications, Lee Kane, sent a message to Cummings in early 22 claiming that the Prime Minister doesn't think COVID is a big deal and he doesn't think anything can be done and his focus is elsewhere. I mean, this is the sort of stuff that we have going on in this thing. I mean, what the hell? Who cares? Well, I mean, that's not what we want to hear. No, I want to hear, did we... Exactly the things that you asked, Christine, but also things about the vaccine and stuff like that. I want to hear that.
Well, we've all enjoyed
some more than others, the sort of public humiliation of Boris, etc.
Oh, I think most people enjoy
really what this has been. But let's be honest, Boris is not going to be there the next time it happens. So
certainly
the personal mistakes that he made really don't matter. What matters exactly is the sort of institutional mistakes that were made.
Because anybody coming into power, my lot, if they're thinking about coming into, hoping to come into power, want to know, even if it's not a pandemic, what the next crisis is, the lessons in crisis management that can be learned, whatever the policy challenge is. Because as we know, in politics, it's the icebergs that get you.
The whole inquiry needs to basically grow up and start talking about proper meat.
It's been going on for a while, though. It's been going on for a while, and it's going to spend 100 million. How much more?
This is Unit 2, and there's 6 units in the initial inquiry.
I can't take it anymore. No,
this is Unit 2.
It's time to stop. It's time to stop. There shouldn't be 6 units. They need to get on with it.
No.
But listen, the show's nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome some of our great British voices. Their opportunity to be on the show and tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. I've got 4 of you. Yes! Right, I'm going to start with you. David Balm in Watford, the COVID inquiry. Right, so we're on Unit 2. There's 6 units to go. David, are they wasting our time?
Totally. I mean, ultimately, all you need to understand is what was the cause? What were they doing apart from running around like headless chickens? Why were they so enamoured with scientists about closing everything down without actually working out the initial costs? Businesses were wiped out, not through COVID, people having COVID, but because they couldn't trade. Nobody seemed to work that. So, for future reference, what was the cause? What happened with their decisions? And how do we avoid it in the future? I could wrap it up. If they want to pay me 100 million, I'll wrap it up for them. I'll be very happy to.
We'll all do it. Yeah, I'll do it. I'll do it just for $1 million. Adrian Jal, you're from Shropshire. Welcome. Lovely to have a newbie.
I am. Thank you very much, Nana, and thank you very much for having me on. But yeah, I mean, it's not just a waste of time; it's an absolutely fantastic waste of money. And what is it actually going to produce at the end of it? Nothing that we don't already know as well, or that we don't already know, other than the only thing which it's proving to be so already, is it's a further whipping tool to whip the likes of Boris Johnson, Matt Hancock, etc. This was a pandemic that came, we now know, from Wuhan, possibly man-manufactured, and it escaped. But the world did not know at the time how it was going to manifest. The nearest thing that they had to look at was Spanish flu and how that spread across the globe at the end of the First World War, and the devastating effects that had. So, with that in mind, the government had nothing else to look back on and had to put various things in place, including lockdown, which, OK, you can look back at now and say...
But the bottom line is... But the bottom line is we want to know how effective these things were and whether they did the right thing, not what's on a WhatsApp. Thank you for that. Let's go to Amanda Hindley, who's there in Kent. Amanda.
Hi, Nana. I find it all a bit embarrassing, to be honest. They're faffing around again, and they're focusing not on analysing the data so we can prevent this from happening again, but on the salacious gossip that is on the WhatsApp group and who's called who a bad word. And these are our government. This is our government here, and they are just focusing on this tit for tat. What a way of honouring the people that were lost during this. Surely there's better ways of honouring their name than this pathetic boys' club again, who called who a bad word.
Yeah, it feels like back at school. Lastly, let's have a chat with Philip Hoy. He's there in Hertfordshire. Philip, what do you think?
Hi, Nana. Great to be with you. Well, I think the inquiry is completely wrong, actually, for all the wrong reasons, or right reasons. I don't think... People have died. There's nothing we can do about it. Very sad. Lots and lots of mistakes were made, but we were facing something we've never faced before. But what nobody seems to be addressing is, tell me, why were all the PPE contracts given to people who had no idea what PPE was? They spent millions and millions, and they had no experience to do it. And secondly, and this is my big bugbear, lots and lots of companies were formed overnight by corrupt accountants, and I'm sorry, I will say that, and I have some knowledge of that,
Yeah.
You could get a 3-year trading history straight away and immediately apply for a loan, apply for the benefits, and then go bust 2 weeks later with your £20,000. That happened time and time again. We lost billions. Nobody is doing an inquiry into that.
Exactly.
Now, HMRC, I'd have thought that's the first thing you should do.
Well, this is what we want them to be doing, not being so self-possessed and focusing on themselves. So I'm going to ask you each, is it a waste of time? I think I know what you're going to say. I'm going to start with you, David Baum. Is it a waste of time, yes or no?
Yes.
OK. Adrian in Shropshire, waste of time, yes or no?
Total. Absolute total.
Amanda in Kent, yes or no, waste of time?
100% yes.
And Philip, finally, in Hertfordshire, yes or no, waste of time?
A very expensive waste of time.
Yeah, very expensive waste of time. Thank you so much, my brilliant, great British voices. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you, brilliant. Thank you. That's my great British voice. Aren't they great? Right, let's move on to another story that caught my eye today. Tonight, of course, is Bonfire Night, an occasion which has transformed from a political event to a widely celebrated annual commemoration. But more recently, there's been growing awareness of the impact of fireworks on animals, war veterans and those with autism due to the loud noise. Some people love them, some people hate them. But should there be tougher restrictions? Since they're pretty much, well, they're little rockets, aren't they? Really, let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by Matthew Larzett and Christine Hamilton. Christine, fireworks, is it time to sort of ban them in a way, to sale for private people like me and you? Because anyone can buy them.
No, I don't think so. I mean, honestly, it's the nanny state gone mad. I mean, of course, if you have a pet, you look after it, you keep, etc. You make sure it's going to be OK. But no, I don't think so. It's one of our great traditions. I mean, Guy Fawkes was a sort of 17th century terrorist, all the word hadn't been invented by then. And
would the BBC have called him a terrorist, though? That's the question.
Oh, well, of course not. No, he'd have been a Catholic, whatever. But, you know, had he succeeded, it would have been a sort of Twin Towers thing. It would have been simply seismic. The whole of our history would have changed. And so it's something that we've always celebrated. It's part of our tradition. And yes, control them, etc. But no, I certainly don't think you should ban them. It's ludicrous.
But ban them to private sale, at least.
I think, yes, I think ban them for private sale.
Yeah.
And actually, because in a lot of places they're abused. We saw that at the protests where they're being thrown at the police, but people throw them in antisocial behaviour. I love Guy Fawkes Night. I don't like Halloween. Dreadful American import. Guy Fawkes Night is a British tradition. We should celebrate it. We should have organised celebrations. But in terms of fireworks in the back garden, no.
Yeah,
fireworks in the park, yes. Yeah. Organised, proper displays.
I loved fireworks in the back garden.
Oh, terrible.
Sparklers.
There's always somebody who gets blinded, somebody who gets burnt, somebody whose life has changed forever in a bad way because of them. I hate them.
People get killed by motor cars.
Yeah,
More
but you don't,
animals get killed by motor cars.
Yeah, but you don't have to. The firework thing is like totally...
An organised display is fine, isn't it? But when there are rules in place and they're professionals doing it.
And sparklers as well, those things.
They're deadly sparklers.
Oh, I love sparklers.
Look, it is.
Type your name. Do you remember doing that, typing your initial?
What killjoys you are.
No.
I never thought Nana would be a banner.
I value my eyes.
That rhymed. I'm getting you back,
Nana
Banner.
Yeah.
I've got you back.
Right, though, it's now time for Supplement Sunday. This is the part of the show where I discuss some of the news stories that caught my eye. Let's start with Matthew's supplement, which is about movie intermission.
Absolutely. So, look, this is a good news story. So this film has come out, Killers of the Flower Moon, which I think is 3 hours and 15 minutes, and View, the cinema chain, are trialing screenings where you get an intermission in the middle. Now, this is a good reason, not only because I'm getting older, and we all need a little break in the middle of advancing years, but my mum, I'm going to tell a little... To stretch your legs,
Just
absolutely.
To stretch your legs,
actually. But I'm going to tell... Do you remember, I mean, when you used to have the usherette, like at the theatre, came down the aisle. My mum was an usherette in a cinema with the ice creams and the strawberry mivvies and the orange, the cartons of orange squash. But she got sacked after one night because she danced in the aisles during the film, and they said that was inappropriate. So she got sacked. She only did one screening before they sacked her for dancing when it,
That's funny.
I never found that out, and she's not here to ask. But that's a very good question.
Yeah.
But anyway,
they're only doing it. They're only doing it so they can make money in the break.
Absolutely, they can sell more strawberry mivvies.
Oh, come on, a film that's over 3 hours.
3 hours and 15 minutes, I think it is.
Well, you need a break, but they're doing it. If they were told they'll lose money if they have a break.
But I always take my own in. I take my own, a can of carbonated beverage.
But do you take your wee sheet?
Carbonate.
Well, that's forming, actually.
No.
Christine, your supplement, please.
My supplement is totally the opposite end of the scale. I was so appalled when I saw that at Charing Cross Station, protesters surrounded the British Legion poppy sellers. These good, honest, decent, upstanding members of society who give up their time to sell poppies at this time of the year. And they were chanting, "Shame at you," on a young child who was leaving McDonald's, launching fireworks at the police. But to surround the British Legion poppy sellers with hate.
But weren't they? Can I just say, weren't they dignified? Absolute heroes. They kept their calm.
Well, of course they were.
And I thought that they showed true British spirit.
But to me, it shows where they're coming from in their hearts.
Yeah.
They could do that to those poppy sellers.
And of course, it does the cause.
No good at all
and gets people's backs up.
No.
Well, so there were some reports that said that they were sort of rolling along quite nicely together, but I mean that's obviously a different one. Well, I didn't.
But they shouldn't. But large groups of people that are intimidating, whether it's football fans, which we know can go on the rampage, or protesters. People need to respect people's space.
Of course they do.
Yeah.
And at this time of the year, I mean, to attack poppy sellers like that and to intimidate them and frighten them was just the pits.
Right. Well, now time for my supplement, which is about Britain's loneliest sheep being rescued by a gang of plucky farmers. Woolly is finally free. This is this little sheep that was on a hill. There he is now. Look, he'd been on there for a very, very long time.
2 years, wasn't it?
Yeah, 2 years. And then it was actually the Daily Star, I think, that backed a campaign to save her. She'd been there. It was perilous conditions, but 2 of those farmers went up there to reach her and lifted her to safety. And now she's resting due to her overgrown fleece. It was sheared today, so she went to the hairdressers.
Well, I bet you that fleece is going to be worth something when it's turned into something, to a nice woolly jumper.
It would
go on eBay.
Coat.
But
although you're probably not allowed to do that anymore. Is that supposed to be bad? But she's not being killed for it. They're still alive.
Sheep need looking after, and that's proof positive.
Yeah, wool is very environmentally friendly.
Yeah,
Well, if you get the coat, but she's still alive, so it's not like you've killed her for the
maybe
coat.
a couple of hats.
A couple of hats. And
you need a hat when he needs to coat.
She'll make a few jumpers. You're quite right. They'll be very expensive.
Yeah. Well, hopefully they maybe go on eBay and sold for the Scottish SPCA who rescued her.
Well, they said that she was the most relaxed sheep that they'd ever seen.
She was probably enjoying the peace, and not having to talk to anybody, not having someone who's...
We wouldn't be able to cope with that, not talking for 2 years.
talking to her all the time.
Well, listen, on today's show, I've been asking, should we ban the pro-Palestinian demonstrations? And according to the Twitter poll, 80% of you said yes. So that is banning them entirely, and 20% of you said no. Huge thank you to my panel, author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton. Christine, thank you very much.
Pleasure, as always.
Thank you. And also thank you very much to Matthew Lala.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure, even if I do get called Lala.
No, it's Matthew.
It's like a sheep's name.
It is, isn't it, Matthew Lala?
It's affectionate.
Exactly.
Exactly.
That's why I come back.
Larry.
Thank you for having me.
I love lamb. It's delicious. And I've got to say thank you to you at home for your company. Listen, don't forget you need to tune in at 9 for the Dinosaur Hour. They've got a real good one tonight, so make sure you join me. Also, don't forget you can also download the GB News app. Thank you so much for your company. I look forward to seeing you next week, same time, same place on Saturday.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. There are a few showers to watch out throughout this bonfire night, particularly for western areas. They could be still heavy at times, pushing their way in across particularly northwest England, western Wales, through the Bristol Channel as well. Western areas of Scotland not escaping either. Into the second half of the night, we could just see a few beginning to skirt their way into Sussex and Kent, but a lot of other eastern areas will remain largely dry with some clear intervals. Underneath that, some mist and fog possible. It will also turn relatively chilly, particularly so for eastern Scotland, where we can expect some frost. So quite a chilly start to the new working week here. But as we head into Monday, it is a day of sunshine and showers for many. Those showers most frequent in the west once again, perhaps a few rumbles of thunder, maybe some hail in those heaviest ones as well. Into the afternoon, just starting to see those showers progress into eastern areas of England, but still with a good amount of sunshine in between them. Temperatures around 10 to 13 degrees Celsius, so fairly pleasant if you are in those sunnier spots. For Tuesday, it will again start relatively showery, but we've got this ridge of high pressure that's going to be moving its way in during the day. That will gradually help to ease off the showers, particularly for western areas as we head into the afternoon. So turning drier here, again, some sunny intervals to watch out for and enjoy if you are out and about. The winds also easing off throughout the day as well. As we head into Wednesday, there is a more persistent band of rain that will be sweeping its way across the UK. And then into Thursday, the showers return once again. Enjoy your evening. Bye-bye.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy
energy this time!
Welcome to the dinosaur hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes it.